Hello friends, welcome to Soft Mystic Stories. Tonight, we step softly, very softly, into a world so old that even the oldest kingdoms feel almost new beside it. The night around you is deep blue, and a small fire cracks in front of a shelter made from branches, hides and patient human hands. Smoke lifts into the cold air. Somewhere beyond the glow, an animal calls once, then goes quiet, as if it too has decided this is not the evening for unnecessary drama. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what your local time is. Maybe it is midnight, maybe it is early morning, maybe the house is finally quiet. Either way, you're here now, beside this ancient fire. Now, dim the lights, and let your eyes adjust to a darkness older than history. You stand at the edge of a low valley, long before cities, long before writing, long before anyone has thought to stack stones into temples or carve laws into clay. This is the hidden span of human time, the tens of thousands of years that passed before farmers planted fields, before kings became troublesome, and before anyone invented taxes, which was, in fairness, a generous era for the human spirit. The air is cool against your face. It smells of damp earth, wood smoke, crushed grass, the faint musk of animal hides. Beneath your feet, the ground is uneven, softened by old leaves and scattered ash. You can feel the night in the space between firelight and shadow, in the hush of a landscape that has never heard a wheel, a church bell, or a phone alarm demanding that you become productive. Here, people live by watching closely. They know the bend of a stream, the season of berries, the direction of migrating herds, the change in wind before rain. Their world is not simple, though modern people sometimes like to imagine it that way. A snapped twig matters, a cloud matters, a footprint in mud might mean food, danger, or just a deer having a private evening stroll. For much of the past 80,000 years, humans survived as hunter-gatherers. That is the steady historical fact beneath this journey. Farming and permanent towns are very recent compared with the long story of Homo sapiens. For most of our existence, people move through landscapes, gathering plants, hunting animals, sharing food, making tools, raising children, telling stories, learning the moods of the land, with an attention many of us now reserve for checking whether our phones are charged. You walk toward the fire slowly. Around the flames sit figures wrapped in hides and woven plant fibers. Their faces catch the orange light, then vanish again into shadow. One person turns wood in the embers. Another scrapes fat from a hide with a stone edge. A child leans against an older woman, blinking sleepily, fighting rest with the noble determination of children everywhere. There is no written record here, no diary waits under a sleeping mat, no helpful sign says, "Welcome to approximately 50,000 years ago." Please enjoy the uncertainty. What scientists know comes from bones, tools, hearths, pigments, seeds, shells, and the tiny traces people left behind without imagining that anyone would study them one day. A burned stone, a cut mark on bone, a bead drilled from shell. These are the quiet documents of the deep past. Human life did not begin with writing. It had already been unfolding for a dizzying length of time. Mothers had comforted babies. Friends had laughed by fires. People had argued about where to camp, because some things apparently are eternal. Scholars remain divided on how much we can truly understand about thought, belief, and daily emotion from material traces alone. Some see carefully made tools and ornaments as signs of symbolic thinking, identity, and ritual. Others warn that we should be gentle with our guesses, because a stone tool can tell us how it was, shaped, but not exactly what someone dreamed while holding it. That uncertainty is part of the quiet mystery. You are walking through a half-lit memory. The fire snaps softly. A few sparks rise and disappear. You notice how everyone sits close, not only for warmth, but for company. The night outside the circle is enormous. There are no streetlights over the hill, no distant town glow, no aircraft blinking across the sky. The stars seem almost crowded, bright enough to make the darkness feel alive. The Milky Way arches overhead like pale smoke, frozen in place. There is a small, quirky detail scientists have found in prehistoric sites that feels oddly familiar. People sometimes collected shells, pigments, and unusual stones from places far away from where they were discovered. Some objects may have traveled through exchange networks, carried hand to hand across wide distances long before souvenir magnets. Someone may have kept a pretty shell because it came from somewhere else. Humanity was already saying, "Look what I found," and possibly, "Yes, I am keeping it." You crouch near the edge of the firelight and feel warmth spreading over your hands. The heat is bright on your palms and cool on your back. Smoke drifts sideways and stings your eyes a little. Nearby, a stone blade rests on a patch of hide. Its edge is sharp, made with skill that took practice and patience. No one here is primitive in the lazy sense of the word. They're ancient, yes, but their lives require memory, planning, cooperation, and a close intelligence tuned to the world around them. To live here is to remember constantly which roots can be eaten, which berries are not worth the dramatic stomach consequences, which path floods after heavy rain, which animal tracks are fresh. Knowledge is not stored in books, it is carried in bodies, habits, songs, gestures, and stories repeated until children know them, before they know why. As the night deepens, the group grows quieter. Conversation becomes murmurs. Someone adds wood to the fire, and the new branch hisses as sap warms inside it. You look beyond the flames and imagine the generations still ahead. Painted caves, long migrations, meetings with other kinds of humans, burials, ornaments, needles, songs, and footprints that will become clues. Much of this world will vanish, much will remain as fragments, and yet, standing here, you can feel the closeness of it. These people are not distant because they lacked writing. They are near because they were human. They were tired at night. They noticed beauty. They cared for children. They watched fires burn low. They lived in the hidden 80,000 years that scientists still study today. Not because those years were empty, but because they were full, soft, difficult, clever, and mostly silent. The fire settles into glowing red. The valley darkens. You breathe in smoke and cold air, and the first door before dawn opens a little wider. You leave the fire slowly, carrying its warmth in your hands as the valley opens into a pale morning hush. The sky is not bright yet. It is that soft hour when the world seems to hold its breath, when the ground is gray, the air is cool, and every sound feels closer than it should. Behind you, the camp has become a low shape in the dimness, a scatter of sleeping forms. Ash, hide, wood, an ember glow. Ahead, the land changes. You walk across a wide plain, where the soil is powdery beneath your feet. Is not ordinary dust. It is fine, pale, and strange. Settled here, after a volcanic eruption, long before your arrival. The ground remembers heat. Even though the morning is cold, each step lifts a faint whisper of ash, and for a moment, you imagine the sky darkened by ancient smoke, the sun hidden, the air thick with falling gray. In prehistoric time, volcanoes could transform entire landscapes. Ash blanketed forests, rivers shifted course, animals moved away, and people had to read the damage quickly. A valley that had once offered plants, water, and shelter might suddenly become dangerous or barren. Early humans did not have weather alerts, emergency broadcasts, or a dramatic news graphic spinning behind a very serious anchor. They had the wind, the smell of the air, the behavior of animals, and the wisdom of anyone old enough to say very calmly, "Perhaps we should not sleep there tonight. This is the larger world you're walking through. Climate shifts, eruptions, droughts, and changing herds all shaped human survival. People moved because they had to, but also because they knew movement. Their homes were not always fixed buildings. Home might be a remembered valley, a seasonal path, a river bend, a circle of faces around fire. The landscape was not background. It was the great partner in every decision. You kneel beside the pale ground and see them. Footprints, not yours, though they look familiar enough to make the back of your neck prickle. Human feet pressed into soft ash or mud long ago, then hardened, then weighted across time. Some prints are larger, some smaller, a few overlap. One line turns slightly, as if the walker looked towards something in the distance. You can almost see the moment someone crossing open land, perhaps with others, perhaps carrying a child, a bundle, a tool, or simply the quiet burden of being alive in a world that never explains itself fully. A mainstream historical fact sits gently beneath the scene. Fossilized footprints are among the most intimate evidence scientists have for ancient human and pre-human movement. Bones can tell us about bodies, tools can tell us about skill, but footprints show motion. They preserve a passing second, a step that should have vanished. Sites in places such as East Africa have revealed ancient trackways, including the famous Lay footprints, far older than Homo sapiens, showing upright, walking in volcanic ash. Later footprints from other parts of the world help researchers understand group movement, body size, speed, and sometimes even the presence of children. You stand and follow the trackway at a respectful distance, as if the people who made it have only just passed and might glance back if you're too noisy. The morning wind brushes across the plain. It smells dry and mineral, with a faint bitter scent from distant plants. Small stones press through the soles of your feet. Somewhere birds call in short, cautious notes. The prints moved towards a shallow depression where water may have gathered after rain. Perhaps this was once a damp edge beside a lake or marsh. You imagine animals coming here too, leaving hoof marks, paw marks, claw marks, the casual signatures of a busy prehistoric neighborhood. Some of those animals are gone now. Others would still be familiar birds, deer-like creatures, small mammals nosing through grass. The past is rarely completely alien. It has a way of offering recognizable moments, then quietly reminding you that there are no grocery stores for several thousand generations. Here is a quirky tidbit, soft but wonderful. Some ancient footprint sites include tiny prints that may belong to children moving beside adults. And in certain places, researchers have suggested that children may have been playing, wandering, or pausing while grown-ups work nearby. The deep past was not all solemn survival and meaningful staring into horizons. Somewhere in all that ash and mud, a child may have stepped oddly just because stepping oddly was fun. This is comforting, really, even in prehistory. Someone was probably told to stop poking something with a stick. Researchers continued to question exactly how to interpret many ancient footprints. A trackway might suggest a group traveling together, but were they family, foragers, hunters, or people leaving danger behind? A pattern of smaller prints might show children, but were they playing, helping, following, or being guided? Scientists can measure stride length, depth, direction, and pressure, yet the inner story remains misty. Evidence gives shape to the moment, but not always its meaning. You walk farther, and the ash plain widens under a sky now turning lavender. The light grows slowly, revealing low hills in the distance. The world feels clean and exposed. There are few places to hide out here. Every movement matters. You begin to understand why ancient people would have watched the ground so carefully. Tracks are messages. A fresh print can mean food. A broken reed can mean water nearby. A drag mark might mean an injured animal or danger, or simply that someone had the prehistoric equivalent of a very awkward morning. The people who made these prints lived without written maps, but they were not lost. Their maps were carried in memory. One person might know where flink could be found. Another might remember when herds crossed the valley. Another might know which ridge gave shelter from winter winds. Knowledge belonged to the group as much as to the individual. Losing an elder or a skilled tracker was not only personal grief, it could mean losing a library. The ash feels cooler now, where shadow lingers. You notice how the footprints deepen in one patch, where the ground must have been wetter. In another place, they grow faint, almost disappearing. That is how most of human history reaches us. Clear for a few steps, then blurred, then gone. The scientists study what remains, not because it answers everything, but because even a partial trace can change the way we imagine ourselves. You pause beside one print, rounded at the heel, spread slightly at the toes, is ordinary. That is what makes it beautiful. Someone put their weight here. Someone balanced, shifted, moved forward. They did not know they were leaving a message for distant minds. They were probably thinking about weather, hunger, family, sore feet, or whether the person ahead was choosing the correct path. Deep history is built from moments like this, not grand announcements, but small pressures in soft ground. The sun finally edges above the hills. Thin and gold, the prints glow for a moment in the low light, each hollow catching shadow. Behind you lies the fire circle. Ahead lies the long road of survival, migration, invention, and memory. You breathe in the cold morning, and you follow the footprints a little farther. Step by careful step across the ash, you leave the pale footprints behind as the day slowly turns and folds itself into evening. The ash plain gives way to rougher ground, then to a rise of stone and scrub where the wind moves colder. By late afternoon, the sky has become a wide sheet of silver blue, and the sun sits low enough to make every grass stem shine at its edge. Ahead, beneath a dark overhang of rock, you see the next camp. It is not a village, not in the later sense. There are no streets, no walls, no neat rows of houses, and certainly no neighbor with strong opinions about where someone should place their mammoth hide. But there is shelter, there is order, there is a hearth at the center, blackened by many fires, and around it are tools, skins, bones, places, baskets of plant fiber, and sleeping places arranged with practical care. Before you step closer, it helps to understand the larger world around this place. For tens of thousands of years, human groups moved with the seasons. They followed animal migrations, ripening plants, water sources, and safer weather. Some camps may have been used briefly, just a night or two. Others were returned to again and again, becoming familiar landmarks in a landscape remembered by generations. Archaeologists often find repeated hearths, layers of ash, stone flakes, butchered bone, and traces of daily work in such places. This camp sits beneath the slope, where the rock blocks the worst of the wind. A stream runs not far below, quiet tonight, with thin ice gathering at its edges. Low bushes grow nearby, their branches bare and dark somewhere in the distance. An animal snorts, and another answers with a soft crackle of movement through brush. The cold presses against your cheeks. You pull your covering closer and step into the glow. The fire is already alive. Its light flickers across faces, hands, stone and hide. You hear the small sounds: first wood settling, someone coughing lightly, a stone scraper rasping against skin, a child whispering and being gently hushed. The smell is thick and layered: smoke, roasted meat, damp woolly hide, crushed herbs, and the clean metallic scent of cold air drifting in from outside. It's not polished or pretty in the modern way, but it is deeply human. It is the smell of shelter. One person sits near the hearth, feeding it slowly with carefully chosen wood. Fire is not casual here. It is warmth, light, protection, cooking, tool-making, and comfort all at once. A mainstream historical fact belongs to this fire-controlled use of fire by humans is very ancient, and by the time of Homo sapiens in the last 80,000 years, fire was central to daily survival across many environments. It made food easier to chew and digest, helped keep predators away. Hardened wooden tools provided warmth in cold climates and extended the useful hours of evening. You settle near the edge of the group, close enough to feel heat on your knees. In modern life, you might press a button and complain mildly if the room takes too long to warm. Here, warmth is work. Someone gathered the fuel. Someone kept embers alive. Someone knew which wood smoked too much, which burned hot, which could be carried as a coal wrapped carefully for the next camp. Fire is technology, but is also responsibility. A woman unwraps a bundle and lays out stones shaped by earlier hands. A man checks a spear point, turning it in the light. An older person, wrapped in a heavy skin, watches everyone with the calm authority of someone who has seen several winters and is not especially impressed by anyone's dramatic ideas. Near the back of the shelter, children sit close together, rubbing sleep from their eyes, still listening even when they call. They pretend not to. The camp is busy, but not hurried. That is one of the soothing surprises of this world. Survival requires effort. Yes, but not every moment is panic. People prepare, they mend, they share, they watch the weather, they talk in low voices. A small piece of bone is passed from one hand to another. A strip of sinew is softened. Someone grinds a plant root on a flat stone. The rhythm is steady like breathing. A quirky tidbit comes from the tiny leftovers scattered in ancient camps. Archaeologists often study stone flakes, the little chips knocked away while making tools. These leftovers can reveal how tool was made, where the stone came from, and sometimes whether a learner was practicing. So yes, even tens of thousands of years ago, someone may have made a messy beginner's calls, while a more experienced relative quietly thought, well, at least they are trying. You look down and notice those flakes near your feet, sharp and bright in the firelight. Some are thin as fish scales, some are chunky and useless. None of them looks important at first, yet these small pieces are like crumbs from a vanished lesson. They show gestures, angle, pressure, mistake, correction. A person sat here, held stone in one hand and a hammerstone in the other, and tried to make something useful from the stubborn world. Scholars still debate how prehistoric camps were organized socially. Some suggest that tasks were divided by age, skill, gender, or experience, while others warn that modern assumptions can be smuggled too easily into ancient scenes. The evidence shows work areas, hearths, tools, food remains, and sleeping spaces, but it rarely tells us exactly who did what or how flexible those roles might have been. The past invites imagination, then gently asks us not to get overconfident. Outside, the sky darkens fully. The first stars appear above the rock ledge. They are sharp and cold, scattered across a sky, untouched by city light. You hear the stream below whispering over stone. A log in the fire splits with a soft pop, and for a moment, sparks drift upward, like tiny orange insects. Someone begins to murmur a story. You do not know the words, not exactly. Perhaps no modern language can reach them, but you understand the shape of it. A hand moves, faces turn, children become still. The voice rises slightly, then falls. Maybe the story explains an animal's behavior, or remembers a dangerous journey, or teases someone who once slipped into a stream and deserved to be remembered forever for it. Every group has these stories. The useful ones, the funny ones, the ones that make fear smaller. The cold stars above remind you that night is long here without fire. Darkness would press hard against the shelter. With fire, the camp becomes a small island of gold. You feel the rough texture of hide beneath your fingers, the heat against your shins, the cool air at your neck. You smell smoke in your hair. You hear breathing, scraping, murmuring, the quiet crackle that holds everyone together. And you realize that this camp beneath cold stars is not only a survival station, it is a home for tonight. Temporary, fragile, smoky, and deeply alive. And the flames lower. The group settles beyond the glow. The ancient world waits, vast and patient. But here, Under stone and starlight, you are warm. The story by the fire fades into softer sounds, and the camp beneath the rock overhang grows still. You remain awake a little longer, watching smoke drift upward and vanish into the dark. Around you, people settle under hides and woven coverings. A child sighs, someone turns over with a rustle of fur. Outside the shelter, the stars keep their silent watch, cold and bright above the sleeping land. By morning, the world is pale again. You wake to the smell of ashes and damp stone. The fire has not gone out completely. A red heart remains under the grey, and one of the older people kneels beside it, coaxing it gently with dry grass. The first flame appears slowly, almost shyly, then catches. Warmth returns, and with it, the camp begins to speak. Not loudly, not with speeches, with small sounds, gestures, glances, and movements so practiced they feel almost like a language before language. Before you follow this group into the day, it helps to understand the larger question around this moment. Scientists know that Homo sapiens had bodies capable of speech tens of thousands of years ago, and probably far earlier. The shape of the vocal tract, the brain's development, and the complexity of human cooperation all suggests that spoken language was part of our deep past. But language leaves almost no direct fossils. Words vanish the moment they're spoken, which is deeply inconsiderate of them, historically speaking. So the early morning around you becomes evidence of another kind. A young hunter lifts a hand and points toward the valley. Another person shakes their head slightly and points higher toward the ridge where the ground may be firmer after rain. An older woman clicks her tongue softly, then taps 2 fingers against her palm. A child watches closely, copying the motion, not yet understanding everything, but learning the rhythm. A man near the fire makes a low sound, and several faces turn at once. You do not need to understand the exact words to understand the purpose. Plans are forming. The group is deciding who will go where, who will stay, which tools are needed, what food remains, whether the weather is safe. Communication here is not decoration. It is survival made audible. A mainstream historical fact belongs here. Early humans lived in cooperative groups, and cooperation required communication. Hunting, gathering, tool-making, caring for children, sharing knowledge of plants and animals, and moving through dangerous landscapes, all depended on the ability to signal, teach, warn, remember, and plan together. Whether through speech, gesture, facial expression, or all of these braided together, human life became possible because people could share what one mind alone could not carry. You step outside the shelter with them. The morning air is sharp enough to wake every part of your face. Frost clings to dry grass. The stream below makes a small glassy sound around thin ice. Someone hands a bundle of sharpened sticks to another person. The exchange is completed with a nod, a brief smile, and a raised eyebrow that somehow seems to say, "Try not to lose these again." Some expressions you suspect are older than grammar. The group divides without confusion. 2 adults and an older child walk toward the stream with carrying skins. Others prepare to search for food in the lower woods. A few remain at camp, tending fire, repairing tools, watching younger children. The movement is quiet, but coordinated. No one appears to be giving a formal lecture titled Efficient Camp Management in the Upper Paleolithic, and for that, everyone is grateful. Instead, meaning passes through posture, sound, memory, and habit. A quirky tidbit from the study of communication is that some researchers look at modern tool-making experiments to understand ancient teaching. When people try to learn stone tool production without language, it is much harder. Gestures help, demonstration helps, but spoken instruction can make the process far clearer. This has led some scholars to suggest that complex tool-making and language may have supported each other over time. In other words, one ancient person may have looked at another terrible flint attempt, and with the prehistoric equivalent of patience, basically said, "No, hit it here." You follow the group toward the ridge. Their feet move carefully over wet stones and roots. One person pauses, raises a hand, and everyone stops. No one asks why. The silence itself becomes shared. You hear it, then a faint crack from the trees below. Not wind, not water. Perhaps an animal, perhaps nothing. After a few breaths, the group continues, but more slowly. This is where communication becomes almost invisible. A look is enough. A hand lowered means wait. A shift in weight means move carefully. The youngest walker copies the adults, stepping where they step. Knowledge travels through attention. Nobody separates language from body here. Meaning lives in the full person: eyes, shoulders, breath, hands, voice, memory. Researchers continue to question when fully modern language emerged. Some argue that rich symbolic behavior, long-distance exchange art, and complex tools suggest language was already highly developed by at least 50,000 to 70,000 years ago. Others think important abilities may have appeared earlier, gradually, without a single, dramatic moment when humanity suddenly began chatting about the weather. The debate remains open because language is both everywhere in human life and almost nowhere in the archaeological record. You reach a place where the ridge overlooks the valley. Mist lies low between the trees. The camp's smoke rises in a thin line behind you. In the distance, birds lift from a marsh in a pale scatter. The group crouches together, and one person traces a line in the dirt with a stick. Another adds a mark. A third taps the ground twice, then points toward the marsh. It is not a map in the modern sense, but it is close enough to make you smile. Humans have always enjoyed explaining where things are by drawing lines that are only obvious to the person drawing them. The plan settles. The group moves again as you walk. You begin to notice how much is taught without ceremony. A child is shown a plant, then gently turned away from another. A young adult copies how to hold a tool. Someone imitates an animal called softly, and another answers with a grin. There is humor here, warmth, correction, irritation, affection. A group does not survive only by being serious. It survives by being connected. The day grows brighter, and with the light comes the soft texture of the world, wet bark under your palm, the clean smell of crushed leaves, the distant sweetness of thawing earth, the chill of mist against your lips. Every sense becomes part of communication. A smell warns of water or animal presence. A bird alarm reveals movement. A silence may be meaningful. Nature is speaking too, though not always in a language that cares where you understand. By afternoon, when you return toward camp, the people are carrying food, water, and new information. The camp receives all of it. Words or gestures explain what was seen: a broken branch, fresh tracks, a patch of edible roots, a place to avoid. The invisible map in everyone's mind becomes a little clearer. The fire is waiting when you arrive. Smoke curls around the shelter. Someone laughs, softly, at something said with hands as much as voice. You sit near the warmth and understand that language, whatever form it took, was not merely a tool. It was the thread between people. It held memory. It carried warnings. It softened fear. It let one human mind reach another in the dark. And as evening lowers again, the camp murmurs itself into night, wrapped in sounds that disappeared long ago, but somehow still feel close. Morning comes with a soft scrape of stone. You hear it before you fully wake. A dry patient tapping near the edge of the shelter. The fire is low, the air still cold, and the camp is wrapped in that gray hour when people move, quietly, because sleep has not completely released them. Someone shifts under a hide. A child murmurs, then settles again. Outside, the wind brushes along the rock feed, with a sound like breath over a clay cup. You turn toward the tapping. An older man sits cross-legged near the fire, holding a piece of flint in one hand and a rounded hammerstone in the other. His hair is tied back with a strip of hide. His shoulders are bent, but not weak. They carry the memory of many winters, many journeys, and many practical disappointments involving rocks that refuse to behave. Beside him, a younger person watches closely, eyes fixed on every movement. Before the scene continues, it helps to understand the historical world behind it. Stone tools were among the most important technologies of early humans, long before metal, pottery, farming, or written instructions that somehow still manage to be confusing. People shaped stone into blades, scrapers, points, burins, and flakes for cutting meat, working hides, shaping wood, preparing plants, and making other tools. In the last 80,000 years, tool traditions became increasingly varied in many regions, reflecting local materials, needs, and inherited skill. The older man turns the flint in his hand. The stone is a dull gray-brown, but where it has been struck, it shines like wet glass. He studies it the way someone today might study a lock, a recipe, or a troublesome email from a government office. There is a correct path hidden inside the material. The task is to find it without ruining everything. He strikes. A thin flake jumps away and lands near his knee. The sound is small but clear. Tick, a pause. Tick, another flake. The younger person leans forward. The older man says something softly, then tilts the stone so the light catches a ridge along its surface. His finger follows the angle. Not there, here. Not too hard, not too close to the edge. The lesson is quiet, but exact. You sit nearby and watch the making of memory. A mainstream historical fact rests in every movement. Prehistoric stone tool production required planning and learned technique. Skilled toolmakers understood how stone fractured, how to prepare striking platforms, how to remove flakes in sequence, and how to repair or reshape tools after use. These were not random broken rocks. They were designed objects made through knowledge passed from person to person. The fire pops softly. Smoke drifts through a gap in the shelter and into the pale morning. The smell of flint dust mixes with ash, hide, and thawing earth. You feel grit beneath your palm. The ground here is scattered with small stone flakes from earlier work, some sharp enough to cut skin if you press carelessly. Ancient workshops, you realize, were not tidy. Humanity is apparently been leaving bits of projects everywhere for a very long time. The younger learner takes the flint. Their first strike is too heavy. A thick chunk breaks away and skitters across the dirt. The older man closes his eyes for a moment, in a way that needs no translation. It is not anger. It is the universal expression of a teacher, reminding himself that learning is good, actually, and that everyone must begin somewhere. The learner gives a small, embarrassed smile. The older man picks up the broken piece, turns it, and shows that even mistakes can be used. This is a quieter kind of survival. Not chasing animals, not crossing glaciers, not facing storms, just sitting by a fire and learning how to make an edge. Yet the edge matters with it. Meat can be sliced more cleanly. Hides can be scraped and softened. Wood can be shaped. Bone can be carved. A good tool saves effort, and saved effort may mean warmth, food, clothing, or time. Here is a quirky tidbit from stone tool studies. Archaeologists can sometimes identify whether flakes came from expert or novice hands by looking at patterns of mistakes, awkward angles, and inefficient removals. Some ancient sites may preserve the traces of learners practicing. It is oddly touching tens of thousands of years later. Scholars can still see the prehistoric version of well that did not go as planned. You pick up one discarded flake carefully. It is light, almost weightless, with a cutting edge so sharp it surprises you. The surface feels smooth in one direction and rough in another. It fits between your fingers as if waiting for use. No ornament, no decoration, just practical elegance in a modern kitchen. You might complain if a knife is slightly dull here. Someone had to make the knife from the earth itself. The camp begins to stir around you. A woman brings over a hide that needs scraping. A child watches the flint lesson, then tries tapping two pebbles together, producing nothing useful, but plenty of confidence. Another adult checks a wooden spear shaft, smoothing its length with a stone edge. Work branches outward from the toolmaker's hands. Stone shapes hide. Hide becomes clothing. Clothing keeps the body warm. Warmth allows travel. Travel carries stories, skills, and people into new lands. Scholars remain divided on how closely tool complexity reflects changes in human thinking. Some argue that more varied and specialized tools show increasing planning, teaching, and symbolic thought. Others caution that tool forms also depend on available materials, local needs, and traditions that may change for reasons that are practical rather than mental. A simple tool can be made by a brilliant person, especially if it works perfectly well and nobody feels the need to impress a future museum curator. The older man now works on a finer piece. He uses a smaller tool, made of bone or antler, to press along the edge. Tiny chips fall away. The motion is slow, controlled, almost meditative. Pressure flaking, you understand, is less dramatic than striking, but more precise. The edge becomes thinner, sharper, more regular. It is craftsmanship in a world without shops, brands, or little stickers that say Premier, premium quality. Outside, the morning brightens. Sunlight touches the mouth of the shelter. You hear water moving below and birds calling from scrub. The air begins to smell warmer, a green scent rising as frost loosens from the ground. Still, the toolmaker continues. He's not hurried. A rushed edge can break. A careless strike can waste good stone. Patience is part of the technology. You imagine how far the knowledge has traveled. Perhaps the older man learned from someone who learned from someone else, back through generations, not written, not recorded, not stored in a library, but held in hands. Every correct angle is inherited. Every warning about bad stone is memory. Every young person watching becomes a possible future keeper of the skill. By midday, the finished tool lies in the older man's palm. It is small, sharp, and balanced. The younger learner touches it carefully, smiling with open admiration. The older man gives a satisfied grunt, which may be the ancient ancestor of a 5-star review. You look at the stone edge and feel the hidden 80,000 years gather around it. So much of human history was made by hands like these, not in palaces, not on battlefields, but beside fires, in cold shelters, with stone dust on the skin and careful teaching in the quiet. The tool is passed to the woman with the hide. Work continues. The day moves on, and the small flakes on the ground catch the light like scattered pieces of time. You leave the shelter off to the morning's patient work, with stone, following the slope down toward the stream, where thin ice breaks softly at the edges. The finished tool is now tucked into a carrying pouch, wrapped with care, as if it is not merely an object, but a small promise. It will cut, scrape, mend, prepare, and perhaps save time when time matters around you. The group begins to move with the steady focus of people who know the day has distance inside it. The camp does not vanish all at once. It comes apart gently. Hides are shaken and folded, ashes covered, useful bones are gathered. Fire is coaxed into embers that can be carried. Children are wrapped more warmly. Someone checks the sky, then the ground, then the faces around the circle. Leaving is not disorder. It is a practiced ritual, a quiet unmaking of home. For much of this hidden human span, movement was ordinary. Early Homo sapiens spread out of Africa in waves over many thousands of years, eventually reaching Southwest Asia, Europe, Australia, and much later, the Americas. These journeys were not one grand parade with everyone politely staying en route. They were slow, branching, uncertain movements by small groups, shaped by weather, food, coastlines, rivers, mountains, animals, and chance. You begin walking. The morning is pale gold now. Grass brushes your legs, wet with frost. The stream follows you for a while, chuckling over stones, then bends away into a low stand of trees. The group keeps close, but not crowded. Adults carry bundles of tools, hides, food, and sleeping materials. A child carries a small stick with great seriousness, which may or may not be essential to the survival of the group, depending on whom you ask. The air smells of damp leaves, old smoke, and cold water. Birds move in the brush with soft wing beats every now and then. Someone pauses to listen. Nothing dramatic happens. That is part of the calm truth of ancient travel. Much of survival is not a thunderous chase or a heroic speech. It is noticing, waiting, choosing a slightly better path, sharing the weight before shoulders ache too badly. You climb onto a ridge where the land opens wide below. The valley stretches into grassland, then darker forest, then distant hills softened by mist. Somewhere beyond those hills may be another river, another camp, another group of people, another language or accent or set of stories by firelight. The world is vast, but not empty. It is threaded with paths remembered in feet. Some researchers describe early human expansion as a mosaic rather than a single straight journey. Groups may have moved forward, paused for generations, retreated when climates worsened, mixed with others, or followed resources along coastlines and inland corridors. The map of human movement looks less like an arrow and more like smoke spreading in quiet air. You descend the far side of the ridge. The ground becomes softer, scattered with pine needles. The smell changes to resin and wet bark. A woman ahead touches a tree trunk, testing sap with her finger. Another person breaks a twig, sniffs it, and slips it into a bundle. Everything has a possible use. Cordage, fuel, medicine, scent, glue. In a modern shop, things come in labeled packages, and we still manage to buy the wrong size. Here, labels are memory. A lesser-known detail hides in the materials people carried. Archaeologists sometimes find stone tools made from rock that came from far away, suggesting ancient people either traveled long distances or exchanged materials with other groups. A piece of stone could move across landscapes before becoming a blade, passing from hand to hand like a quiet message long before Rude's markets or awkward small talk at craft fairs. Useful objects were already traveling. The group stops near a midday in a sheltered hollow. No one builds a full camp. This is only a pause. Someone opens a pouch of gathered food. Roots, seeds, dried meat, perhaps berries if the season allows. The meal is simple, chewed slowly, shared without ceremony. You sit on a fallen log as a bark cold and rough beneath you, and listen to the small human sounds of eating, shifting, breathing, and occasionally correcting a child who has discovered that mud remains interesting in every century. Travel depends on bodies. Feet toughen, shoulders strengthen, knees complain, because knees have always been honest. The group knows how far the youngest can walk, how often the older ones need to rest, who can carry more, who has a sore ankle, who should not be trusted to remember where the water skin was placed. Movement is social as much as geographical. A group can only travel as well as it cares for its members. Researchers continue to question how quickly Homo sapiens moved into different regions and what routes they took. Coastal pathways may have helped people spread along rich shorelines, while river valleys and grassland corridors opened other possibilities. Changing sea levels have hidden many ancient coastal sites underwater, which is rude, but scientifically important, because the shorelines of the Ice Age were often far beyond today's beaches. Some of the best evidence may now lie beneath the sea. You rise again and follow the others through late afternoon light. The path is not marked, but people know it. A bent tree, a dark rock, a patch of reeds, a hill shaped like a sleeping animal. The landscape becomes a memory palace without walls. You begin to understand that migration is not only leaving, it is also recognizing, returning, adjusting. Teaching children the way one bend in the river means safety, while another means mosquitoes with far too much ambition. By evening, the group reaches a place where the land slopes gently toward a broad river. The water shines under the lowering sun, copper and silver between reeds. Animal tracks crowd the muddy bank. Birds call from the shallows. The air is colder here, carrying the smell of water, fish, and wet clay. This might be tonight's shelter. Not forever, just enough. The fire is made again. Dry grass catches. Twigs glow. Larger wood begins to burn. Smoke rises into the dusk, and the long road pauses around it. Bundles are lowered. Children sink gratefully onto hides. Someone laughs at a tired joke. Someone else checks the riverbank for prints. The day's journey becomes evening story almost immediately, because humans cannot seem to experience inconvenience without turning it into narrative. You sit near the new fire and look back toward the darkening route. Every camp you have visited so far has felt temporary, yet each one has been complete for its moment. The shelter under stone, the ash plain, the valley fire, now this riverbank. The human story moves this way. Not in clean chapters but in steps. Step after step, people carried tools, embers, children, memory, food, grief, humor, and hope. Across grasslands and forests, along rivers and coasts, through warm seasons and bitter cold, they moved outward into the world. The night settles on the river. The firelight trembles on faces. Somewhere beyond the reeds, an animal drinks in the dark, then slips away. You listen to the water and understand that the long road is not only about distance, it is about becoming familiar with the unknown. And tomorrow, when the embers are wrapped and the bundles lifted again, the road will continue. You wake beside the river before sunrise. When the world is still made mostly of mist and quiet water, the fire has softened into embers, breathing red beneath a grey skin of ash around you. The group sleeps in low shapes under hides and woven coverings, while reeds whisper along the reed bank. The air smells damp and mineral, with a faint green scent rising from the marsh. Cold settles on your hands, and the ground beneath you feels firm at first, then slightly muddy when you shift your weight. The river is not merely scenery here, it is road, pantry, warning, and mirror. It carries fish. It draws animals. It offers reeds, clay, fresh water, and a path through land that might otherwise be difficult to cross. In the deep human past, waterways mattered enormously. Rivers and coasts helped guide movement, because where there was water, there was often food, plant life, and a chain of places where people could rest. As the sky lightens, the camp begins to stir. A woman rises first and walks quietly toward the bank, holding a woven container. Another person follows with a sharpened stick and a bundle of cord. The children are not fully awake yet, which is possibly for the best. Since ancient mornings do not come with warm pastries, unless someone has been extremely inventive with roots, you step closer to the water. It slides past in slow bands of silver. Small ripples widen near the reeds, where fish disturb the surface. Birds stand thin-legged in the shallows, patient and judgmental, as birds often are. Across the river, the land rises into low woodland behind you. The plain stretches away toward the yesterday's path, already fading into memory. People gather along the shore with practiced ease. One person checks a narrow basket trap tucked among reeds. Another digs in the mud for shellfish, fingers moving carefully through cold silt. Someone lifts stones to search for small creatures underneath. The group is not hunting in the dramatic way modern documentaries enjoy showing, with urgent music and everyone looking heroic against the sunset. This is quieter. It is breakfast deciding whether to cooperate. One solid piece of historical grounding belongs here. Ancient humans made wide use of aquatic and coastal foods where they were available. Archaeological sites in Africa and beyond show evidence of shellfish collection, fishing, and the use of marine resources tens of thousands of years ago. These foods may have provided dependable nourishment in certain regions, especially along shores, lakes, estuaries, and rivers. A shell midden, which is a heap of discarded shells, can be as revealing as a palace wall, though admittedly less glamorous on postcards. The woman with the basket trap kneels and lifts it slowly. Water streams through the weave. Inside, something flashes. A fish flicks its body, silver and quick, and a child who is suddenly very awake gasps with delight. The fish is removed with care. It is not large, but it matters. Enough small successes become survival. Nearby, someone opens shells with a stone tool. The sound is soft and wet. A crack, a twist, a scrape. The smell is briny, sharp, and alive. You might think of seafood restaurants, menus, polished glasses, little forks with mysterious purposes. Here the meal comes with mud on the fingers and cold water numbing the skin. Still, the principle is familiar. People gather where food can be found, and then someone has to do the work of opening it. A curious lesser-known detail comes from ochre and shell finds at coastal sites. Some shells were not only eaten, but also pierced, colored, or carried as ornaments. Tiny marine shells found far from the shore suggest people valued them beyond food. A shell could be a bead, a memory, a sign of belonging, or perhaps simply the prehistoric equivalent of picking up something pretty and saying, "No reason, I just like it." The tide, if this were a coast, would shape the rhythm of the day. Even here along the river, water has moods. It rises after rain, falls in dry seasons, freezes at the edge in cold months, and changes the paths animals take. People who live with water learn its habits. They know which banks collapse, which pools keep fish, which reeds cut the hand, where clay is good, where insects gather in numbers. Best described as personally disrespectful. The group moves downstream. You follow along the muddy edge, feeling the cold seep through your stern. Reeds brush your legs with a papery sound. A kingfisher darts low over the water, blue in the pale light, then vanishes. Someone points to prints in the mud. Deer, perhaps smaller animals too. The river keeps records overnight, writing in hoof, paw, claw, and foot. The question of how much rivers and coast-shaped human migration remains open. Many specialists suggest that shorelines may have offered early humans rich routes into new lands with shellfish, fish, birds, plants, and fresh water helping groups move gradually. Others point out that inland corridors, grasslands, and river valleys were also important, and that changing climates would have opened and closed routes over time. The difficulty is that many ancient coastal landscapes now lie underwater because sea levels rose after the Ice Age. The evidence is there, perhaps, but inconveniently soggy. By mid-morning, the group finds a sheltered bend where driftwood is gathered. Someone selects dry pieces from above the waterline. Another tests a lump of clay, rolling it between fingers. Children search among stones and shells, occasionally discovering treasures that adults classify as either useful, beautiful, or "please put that down." You sit on a flat rock, warmed by the weak sun, and watch the river carry leaves past your feet. The sound is gentle, repetitive, almost like breathing. Water makes time visible. It passes, but never empties. Perhaps that is why ancient people returned to rivers again and again. They changed, but they could also be recognized. A bend in the water might become part of a group story for generations. The meal is prepared near noon. Fish cooks over flame, its skin blistering and curling. Shellfish are warmed in embers. Roots are rinsed, sliced, and shared. Smoke drifts ye over the riverbank, mixing with the smell of wet clay and cooked food. Everyone eats slowly. No one wastes much. Bones, shells, and scraps are set aside or discarded in places where thousands of years later, patient archaeologists may crouch and think, "Ah yes, lunch." You smile at that. The remains of ordinary meals can become scientific treasure. A pile of shells may reveal season, diet, environment, tool use, and repeated visits to the same place. What looks like trash in one century becomes evidence in another. This is a comforting thought, though perhaps not one to use as an excuse for your bedside table. Afternoon softens the light. The group rests near the reeds. Some repair cord, others clean tools. A child threads a small shell onto fiber, concentrating fiercely. The shell is pale, with a tiny natural hole widened by patient work. It catches the light like a drop of moon. As evening approaches, mist begins to return to the water. Birds settle. The river darkens from silver to blue-gray. The group gathers close to the fire again, warmer now, fed by the patient gifts of mud, reed, shell, and current. You listen to water slipping past in the dark, and understand that the long road outward may have followed sounds like this. Not always across open plains, not always over mountains. Sometimes it moved beside rivers and moonlit shores, where food hid in the shallows, and the path shone softly under the night sky. By morning, the river mist has lifted, and the group moves away from the water into colder country. The land rises slowly, as if the earth is drawing a blanket around its shoulders. Trees grow shorter, wind moves more freely. The grass is tough and pale, bending under a sky that looks washed with ash. Every breath enters your chest cold and clean. You walk with the others across a broad, open slope. The river is behind you now, though its sound seems to remain in memory, a soft thread fitting under the crunch of frost. Ahead, the hills darken into a northern world of stone, scrub, and scattered pine. This is not empty land. It has paths, camps, animals, hidden shelters, and other people. Not strangers. Exactly. Oh, exactly. Not quite the same either. For much of the last ice age, Homo sapiens shared parts of Eurasia with Neanderthals, a close human relative adapted to colder environments. Neanderthals lived in Europe and Western Asia for hundreds of thousands of years before disappearing around 40,000 years ago. They made tools, controlled fire, hunted large animals, used shelters, and in some places appear to have cared for injured group members. They were not the clumsy brutes of old cartoons, which is a relief because old cartoons were very confident about many things and not always correct. The first sign of them is smoke. A thin gray line rises from a hollow between low cliffs. The group slows. No one panics. No one rushes forward. A few people exchange glances, then move carefully to higher ground where they can look down without being seen too clearly. You follow, stepping over brittle grass and loose stones. The wind carries the smell of cold earth, pine resin, and distant fire. Below, near the shelter of a rock wall, another camp flickers. Figures move around a hearth. They are broad, sturdy, wrapped in hides. One bends over a carcass, working with a stone tool. Another carries wood. A smaller figure sits close to the fire, turning something in its hands. From this distance, they are deeply familiar. Fire, shelter, tools, food, watchfulness, the same basic needs, the same evening smoke. And yet you sense difference too. Their bodies are stockier, built for cold, with strong limbs and wide chests. Their faces, if seen closer, would show heavy brow ridges and large noses, features that help them live in harsh climates. But the glow of the fire softens everything under night and smoke. The differences feel less like borders and more like variations in an old human song. A well-established discovery from recent science is that many people alive today carry a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA, usually outside Sub-Sahara and Africa, evidence that Homo sapiens and Neanderthals interbred after modern humans moved into Eurasia. This means the neighbor below the cliff is not just a vanished figure from a museum display in a quiet biological sense. For many modern people, Neanderthals are family, though admittedly for family from a very long and complicated branch of the tree. Your group watches without speaking loudly. The older woman from the fire circle studies the camp below. A younger adult shifts uneasily. Perhaps these groups have met before. Perhaps they traded stone, shells, knowledge, or warnings. Perhaps they avoided each other when food was scarce. The past does not offer one simple script. Meeting another kind of human would not always be dramatic. Sometimes it may have been cautious, practical, awkward, and filled with the ancient equivalent of wondering whether to wave. A small detail from Neanderthal archaeology feels almost domestic. Some sites show evidence that Neanderthals used feathers, pigments, or claws in ways that may have been decorative or symbolic. At one site, eagle talons appear to have been modified, perhaps as ornaments. Imagine the care of that gesture. The choice to keep and shape something not strictly needed for dinner. Even in cold landscapes, style may have found a way, because apparently looking interesting has been a human concern for quite some time. The wind shifts, a sound rises from the lower camp, a short call, then another. One of the Neanderthals looks toward the slope. Your group becomes still. The moment stretches, but gently without alarm. The figure below watches for a while, then turns back to the fire. Maybe they saw movement. Maybe they smelled smoke from your group earlier. Maybe they simply know, as all careful people do, that they are not alone in the land. Whether Neanderthals and Homo sapiens understood each other's speech remains uncertain. Some experts argue that Neanderthals likely had some form of spoken language based on anatomy, genetics, and the complexity of their behavior. Others are more cautious, suggesting that while they communicated effectively, the exact richness and structure of their language cannot be recovered. Words leave no bones. A conversation across this valley, if it happened, has dissolved entirely into air. You descend with a group, not toward the camp, but along a side path that keeps distance. This is wise. A neighbor does not need to become a conflict or a friendship in every telling. Sometimes the respectful choice is simply to pass through carefully, leaving space. The land is wide, but resources are not endless. A herd can move away, a storm can trap everyone. A patch of good stone can be remembered by more than one group. As you walk, you think of how old misunderstanding shaped modern imagination. For a long time, Neanderthals were treated as failures, lesser beings who vanished when superior humans arrived. But discoveries over the last century have complicated that picture. They adapted for a very long time. They survived ice and hunger. They taught their young. They buried some dead, or at least placed bodies in ways that invite question. They made tools with skill. They endured. The afternoon fades into a bruised purple evening. Snow begins to fall lightly at first, tiny flakes catching in hair and hide. The group finds shelter beneath leaning pines where the ground is dry enough for a small fire. Wood smoke rises, and for a moment you can see another distant thread of smoke from the Neanderthal hollow. Both fires breathing into the same cold sky. You sit close to the flames. The heat prickles against your shins. Snow melts on your shoulders. Someone passes food from hand to hand. No one speaks much. The day has given everyone something to think about. Across the dark land, another group may be doing the same. Another fire, another child leaning into warmth, another tool edge flashing in the light, another watcher listening to animals move beyond the trees. The Neanderthal neighbor remains nearby, familiar and mysterious. Not monster, not shadow, not simple stepping stone on the way to us. A different human presence in the cold, living its own full life under the same stars. And as night settles gently over both camps, you feel the deep past widen, making room for more than one kind of human story. Snow has fallen in the night, thin and powdery, just enough to soften the edges of the world. When you wake beneath the leaning pines, the ground beyond the fire is pale, and every branch holds a small line of white. The morning is quiet in the way only snow can make it quiet, as if the land has lowered its voice for everyone still sleeping. The group rises slowly, Fingers are stiff. Breath clouds in front of faces. The fire is coaxed back from embers, and people warm their hands over it before gathering what must be carried behind you somewhere, beyond the trees and low hills. The other campery meds unseen. Perhaps its smoke is rising too. Perhaps the Neanderthal neighbor is waking into the same cold morning with the same mild disappointment that the firewood pile looks smaller than hoped. Today, the group turns toward a cave, not a grand cathedral cave painted with animals deep underground. Not yet. This is a practical shelter, a dark opening and a limestone slope above a narrow valley. It faces away from the strongest wind. Its entrance is wide enough for several people to work near the light, and deep enough to hold darkness even at noon. The path up to it is slick with frost, and you climb carefully, feeling stone shift beneath your feet before you enter. It helps to understand the world of such places. Caves and rock shelters were used by prehistoric humans across many regions, but they were not always permanent homes. Some were seasonal camps, hunting stations, tool-making places, ritual spaces, or brief refuges from weather. Archaeologists study layers inside caves like pages in a book, ash from hearths. Animal bones, stone flakes, pigments, pollen, charcoal, and compacted earth. Each layer holds traces of people arriving, working, eating, resting, and leaving again. Resting, and at the entrance, the smell reaches you. First smoke, old ash, damp stone, animal hide, earth, and something mineral, like cold water resting in darkness. The cave mouth frames the valley below, where snow lies in pale patches between scrub and rock. Inside, the air is still. Drops fall somewhere in the back, one at a time, with patient little ticks. The sound seems louder than it should. The group steps in, and their bodies become shadows against the light. Someone kneels near an old hearth and brushes away loose ash. Charred stones form a rough circle. This place has been used before, perhaps by the same group, perhaps by others, perhaps over many generations. The floor is uneven, packed down in some places, and littered with fragments in others. A thing here is random exactly, but nothing is tidy either. Prehistoric interior design leans strongly toward practical clutter. You move deeper, but not too far. The entrance light fades quickly. A small fire is started near the front, where smoke can drift outward. Flames catch, illuminating the cave roof in trembling orange. Soot stains the stone overhead. Dark smudges from earlier fires. The walls seem to lean close, holding warmth, smell, sound, and memory. One dependable fact from archaeology is that hearths inside caves can reveal repeated human occupation. Burned sediment, charcoal, heated stones, ash lenses, and microscopic traces help researchers identify where fires were built and how often shelters were used. Fire inside a cave changed everything. It made darkness livable. It turned stone chambers into places for cooking, tool repair, conversation, and sleep. You sit on a hide near the hearth. The cold begins to leave your hands around you. The cave becomes active. One person scrapes a hide, working carefully to remove clinging tissue. Another cracks bone to reach marrow. A child gathers small chips of stone into a little pile, possibly helping, possibly making their own museum of things adults keep stepping on. Someone hangs damp skins near the warmth, not too close to the fire, because smoke dries and preserves. But flames are famously bad at subtlety. The scrape of stone against hide fills the cave with a dry, steady rhythm. It is almost soothing. Scrape, pause, turn, scrape, pause, shake. The hide smells strong, animal, and fatty, but also faintly smoky. Your fingers brush a finished piece nearby, and it feels surprisingly soft, worked until it bends rather than stiffens. Clothing, bedding, bags, straps, shelter coverings, all of it begins with labor like this. A small, unexpected detail from cave sites is that smoke management may have been a real challenge. Experiments in reconstructed prehistoric settings show that hearth placement, cave shape, airflow, and fuel choice all affect how breathable a shelter remains. People likely learned where to place fires, so smoke drifted out instead of filling the chamber. In other words, ancient families may also have had someone who insisted the fire should go over there, not here. And annoyingly, they were probably right. The smoke curls upward, touches the darkened roof, then moves toward the entrance in a slow ribbon. Outside, snow begins again, visible as gray flecks beyond the firelight. Inside, the cave holds warmth unevenly. Your face is warm. Your back is cool. The stone under you keeps the memory of winter. Near the wall, a young person crushes red pigment with a rounded stone. The color brightens as it powders, a deep earthy red against the gray floor. No one paints yet. Perhaps the pigment will be used on skin, hide, tools, or something else. The sight of it in this smoky cave feels important, though you cannot say why. Color is never just color for long. Human beings have a habit of turning useful things into meaningful things, then arguing about what the meaning was. Experts still differ on how to interpret many cave activities. A shelter might be a living space, a workshop, a symbolic place, or all of these at different times. Certain bones suggest daily life, while pigments, unusual objects, or marks on walls may hint at ritual or identity. But the same cave could host ordinary meals one season and special gatherings another. The past does not sort itself neatly into our categories, which is inconvenient, but also much more human. As afternoon dims, the cave grows more intimate. The entrance becomes a rectangle of blue light. The valley outside fades into snow and shadow. Inside, firelight glides over faces, tools, hides, and stone. The group eats quietly. Bones crack. Fat hisses in the flame. Someone tells a low story, and the cave changes the voice, deepening it, returning it from the walls as a murmur. You notice small things everywhere. A cord looped around a peg of stone. A stone scraper placed within easy reach. Tiny footprints near the softer earth at the entrance. Charcoal marks where someone brushed the wall with a blackened stick. A sleeping place lined with dry grass. These details do not shout. They whisper that people were here, and here mattered. Night settles outside, but the cave remains amber near the fire. Beyond the glow, darkness gathers thick and calm. Drops continue falling in the rear chamber, marking time in slow beads of sound. Smoke scents your hair and clothing. Your eyelids grow heavy. You understand now that a cave is not simply a hole in stone. It is a pause in the weather, a container of warmth, a place where human breath, animal hide, red pigment, stone tools, and old smoke can gather for a little while against the cold. And as the fire lowers, the cave holds the group gently, like the earth itself has made room for sleep. The cave night passes slowly, softened by smoke, and the steady dripping of water in the dark. When morning arrives, it does not rush in. Light gathers first at the entrance, pale and blue, then creeps across the stone floor, until the hearth, the hides, and the sleeping faces return from shadow. The fire is low. Ash lies over the embers like grey wool outside. The snow is stopped, leaving the valley quiet and washed clean. You step from the cave into the cold air and feel the day open around you. The sky is clear. The ground crunches underfoot. Frost silvered the grass during the night, and now each blade catches the morning light. Below the slope, the stream winds between dark stones half hidden by ice. The world looks peaceful, but the group moves with unusual care. Today they are not simply traveling, they are remembering someone. A little way from the cave entrance, beyond a cluster of low shrubs, there is a shallow hollow in the earth. Several people stand nearby, wrapped in hides. Their faces quiet. No one wails. No one moves dramatically. The mood is not empty of feeling, though it is concentrated, soft, heavy, in the way winter air can be heavy before snow. To understand this moment, you need a little background. Burials in deep prehistory are among the most moving and difficult traces archaeologists study. Some ancient human remains were placed in pits or protected spaces rather than left exposed, and in certain cases, bodies seem to have been arranged with care. Burial practices became more visible in the Upper Paleolithic, but possible earlier examples, including among Neanderthals, remain debated. A grave is never only a hole in the ground. It is a question left for the future. The person in the hollow is wrapped in hide. 2. You cannot see their face. A few stones have been set around the place. Not in a grand monument, just enough vow or to mark it. Someone kneels and places a small object beside the body. It may be a tool, it may be a piece of pigment, it may have belonged to the person, or perhaps it is a gift from the living, which is one of the oldest and strangest ideas humans ever had, that something useful, beautiful, or familiar should go with someone who no longer rises with the morning. The wind moves softly through the shrubs. You hear hides rustle. Someone breathes shakily and then steadies. A child stands close to an adult, pressed into their side. No one seems eager to speak. Even in a world where survival demands constant work, this pause has been made. Time has been taken. Hands have dug frozen soil. Objects have been chosen. The living have gathered. One reliable piece of evidence from prehistoric graves is that some were associated with red, ochre, shells, beads, tools, or animal remains. These objects do not always mean the same thing in every place, but they suggest that many ancient communities gave attention to the dead in ways that went beyond simple disposal. Care for bodies can reveal social bonds, memory, and perhaps belief, though the exact meaning often remains just out of reach. The older woman from the camp steps forward. She carries a little red pigment in a small fold of hide. The powder is the same deep earth color you saw crushed in the cave, red like dried leaves, blood, clay, and sunset all at once. She touches it to the wrapped hide, leaving a small mark. Then she sits back on her heels. It is a small gesture. Because it is small, it feels enormous. A lesser-known detail, quiet enough to fit this morning, is that archaeologists sometimes find graves of children with ornaments or carefully placed items. Such burials remind researchers that prehistoric children were not invisible members of their communities. They were loved, mourned, and remembered. The deep past can feel vast and abstract until you imagine a tiny bead placed with a child, and then suddenly 30,000 years feels very close indeed. Around the hollow, others add earth by hand. They do not hurry. Frozen soil clumps under their fingers. Small stones are placed gently. Someone smooths the surface. The child watches solemn and wide-eyed. Perhaps they understand death. Perhaps they only understand that the adults are quiet, and that quiet itself is important. Modern life often hides death away, behind doors, schedules, paperwork, and messages sent in careful language. Here, death sits in the open air, beneath a cold sky. It belongs to the group, as birth does, as hunger does, as fire does. There is no illusion that life is separate from the land. Bodies return to earth. Memory remains with those who keep walking. Specialists continue to disagree about how to interpret the earliest burials. Some argue that deliberate placement of bodies and grave goods points to symbolic thought, emotional bonds, and perhaps ideas about an afterlife. Others caution that natural processes, later disturbance, or practical concerns may explain some finds, and that we should not assume every object near a body was placed with ritual meaning. The evidence is tender, but it is also incomplete. A grave invites reverence, and science answers with careful questions. The group stays near the hollow for a while. After the earth is set in place, the fire at the cave entrance sends a narrow column of smoke into the morning. It smells faintly of pine and ash. The sun climbs, but warmth comes slowly. A raven calls from somewhere beyond the ridge, its voice rough and distant. No one looks startled. The sound belongs to the day. Eventually, in practical life begins to return. Someone goes to fetch water, another checks the drying hides. A young adult gathers wood from beneath overhanging branches where the snow did not reach. Grief does not stop work for long here, not because people feel less, but because the world keeps asking for food, heat, shelter, and care. The living must continue. That is both cruel and merciful. You walk a little distance from the burial place and look back. The hollow is now just a low-rise of disturbed earth and stones. In time, snow will cover it. Spring grass may grow there. Animals may pass without knowing. Thousands of years could reduce the body to fragments, the objects to clues, the gesture to a theory written in careful words. But for this morning it is known. It is held in memory by everyone who stood there. Inside the cave later, the mood remains softened. Voices are lower. Food is shared quietly. The older woman sits near the fire with the child beside her. She tells something in a low, tile tone, perhaps a memory of the person gone, perhaps a lesson, perhaps both. The child listens with one hand curled around a small stone. The flames brighten and dim. Smoke drifts toward the entrance. Outside, the winter sun begins its slow fall. You can still feel the burial place behind you, not as fear, but as a calm presence in the day. The hidden human years were filled not only with survival, invention, movement, and hunger, they were also filled with farewells. You sit close to the warmth and understand that care for the dead may be one of the clearest signs of care among the living. Someone mattered enough to be placed gently in the earth. Someone mattered enough to be remembered at dusk. And as the cave grows quiet again, the small marked hollow outside rests beneath the fading light, keeping its silence for a very long time. By the next morning, the burial place has already begun to blend into the winter earth. A thin skin of frost lies across the stones. The disturbed soil is darker than the ground around it, but from a distance, it could almost be natural, just another quiet fold in the land. The group does not gather there again, yet people glance toward it while they work. Memory has a way of living at the edge of ordinary tasks. Inside the cave, the air is warmer than outside in Meuse, though it still carries the chill of stone. The fire has been built up early, and its light moves across the walls in soft orange waves. Smoke stains the roof above the hearth. Hides hang near the entrance. A few tools lie arranged on a flat rock. The day begins not with travel, but with color. The older woman sits near the fire, with a small stone pallet in front of her. On it lies a piece of red ochre, rough and earthy, like a fragment of dried sunset. Beside it are other materials: charcoal, black as night soil, pale clay, a little animal fat, and a shallow shell used as a cup. She picks up a grinding stone and begins to crush the ochre. The sound is low and sandy, a soft rasp that fills the cave like slow breathing. Ochre is one of the most enduring materials in the archaeological record. People used red and yellow iron-rich pigments across many regions of the prehistoric world, sometimes tens of thousands of years ago. It appears in burials, on tools, on shells, on bodies, and later on cave walls. It could have practical uses, such as hide treatment or protection from insects and sun, but it also seems to have carried visual and possibly symbolic power. Red is difficult to ignore. Even fire seems to recognize it. You watch as the powder gathers. The old woman adds a little fat and works it into a paste. Her fingers become stained. The red settles into the lines of her skin, bright against the cold gray morning. A child leans close, fascinated, and is gently pushed back before the mixture becomes a full-body experiment. Children, as always, are drawn to anything that can stain them dramatically. Around the cave, people prepare for something that is not exactly a feast, not exactly a ceremony, and not exactly ordinary grooming. The categories are yours, not theirs. For them, the use of pigment may be part of many things at once: identity, memory, beauty, group belonging, protection, mourning, storytelling, or play. The modern mind likes separate labels. The ancient world may not have been so tidy. A younger adult brings forward a strip of hide. The older woman rubs red pigment along its edge. Another person marks a tool handle with a narrow line. Then she touches the paste to someone's cheek, drawing a small stroke under the eye. The person sits still, eyes lowered, not solemn exactly, but attentive. The red mark catches the firelight and seems to warm the face. Evidence from prehistoric sites shows that pigments were often collected, processed, and sometimes transported over distance. This means people did not always use whatever colorful rock happened to be underfoot. They selected, carried, stored, and prepared color. That kind of effort suggests value. Maybe practical, maybe social, maybe spiritual, maybe all of these. Because humans are very good at making one object do several jobs while pretending this is convenient. You touch the cave wall lightly. The stone is cold and damp in places, dry and powdery in others. The firelight makes shallow curves appear and disappear. No animal paintings cover this wall yet, but you can imagine color finding its way here eventually. A hand dipped in pigment, a line, a smear, a sign that someone stood in this darkness and wanted to leave contact behind. One small and fascinating clue from deep prehistory is the use of perforated shells stained with pigment. In some sites, shells with traces of red ochre appear to have been worn as beads or ornaments. Such objects are tiny, easy to overlook, and yet they may speak of identity in a world without written names. A bead might say, "I belong with these people," or "I came from that shore," or "I simply enjoy looking excellent in firelight," which is not an unworthy human motive. The older woman now marks the child's hand, a red line across the knuckles. The child stares at it, delighted, and suddenly serious, as if promoted into some new category of person nearby. Another child demands equal treatment with the silent intensity of all younger siblings in history. The cave softens with a few low laughs. Still, color can hold grief, too. The burial outside lingers in everyone's mind. Perhaps this morning's pigment marks are connected to the person placed in the earth. Perhaps they are not. Perhaps the group marks bodies after loss, before travel, during gatherings, or whenever red ochre is available and someone feels the need to make meaning visible. You cannot know. The uncertainty is part of the scene, like shadowed kiss at the edge of the fire. Interpretations of prehistoric pigment use remain careful and varied. Some specialists see ochre as strong evidence for symbolic behavior, especially when it appears in ornaments, burials, or markings. Others remind us that ochre can also preserve hides, repel insects, help with hafting adhesives, or serve other practical purposes. A red stain may be art, technology, medicine, ritual, or fashion. In the deep past, it may have been rude enough to be all four. By midday, the cave smells of fat, smoke, stone dust, and iron-rich earth. The red paste rests in its shell cup beside the hearth. Marked faces move in and out of the firelight. A strip of hide dries with red along its edge. A tool handle bears a small streak. The child with the painted hand keeps looking at it, turning fingers back and forth, admiring the transformation. You step outside for a moment. The cold air clears your lungs. Snow melts slowly from the rocks near the entrance. The burial hollow lies quiet beneath frost. Above it, the sky is pale and wide. You lift your own hand and imagine a line of red across the skin, a sign that would fade in days, but matter while it lasted. That is the strange beauty of body decoration. It is temporary, yet powerful. It says something in the present moment. I am here. I am part of this. I remember. I prepare. I am seen. Long before mirrors filled homes, and photographs followed us everywhere, people still found ways to shape how they appeared to one another. Evening returns gently. The group gathers by the fire. Red marks glow on cheeks, hands, hides, and tools. Outside, the winter valley darkens. Inside, color resists the gray. The older woman covers the remaining pigment carefully, saving it for another day. Nothing useful is wasted. Nothing meaningful is treated casually. You watch the flames brighten and lower, and you feel how ancient this desire is to take earth, grind it fine, mix it with warmth, and place it on skin, to turn the body into a message, to make memory visible for a while. The cave settles into sleep, but the red remains in the firelight, soft as an ember, bright as a thought that has crossed 80,000 years to find you. The red marks are still visible the next morning, softened now at the edges by sleep, smoke, and the ordinary business of staying alive. A line beneath one eye has blurred into a warm shadow. A child's painted knuckles are smudged from touching hides, stones, and at least 3 things no adult wanted touched. The cave smells of ash, damp, woolly skin, and the faint iron scent of pigment. Outside, the valley is quiet. Snow lies in broken patches, and the sky is the pale color of bone. The group remains near the cave for another day, held there by weather, by memory, and by the practical need to repair tools and clothing before moving again. A cold wind moves across the slope, but inside the shelter, the fire keeps its small golden circle. People sit not crowded, but near enough to share warmth. At first, the morning's full of work. Stone scrapes hide, cord is twisted, wood is trimmed. A young person checks the binding on a spear point, tightening sinjuche with careful fingers. Another grind seeds or roots on a flat stone. These are the sounds of survival, repetitive and low, almost like a rhythm the group lives inside. Then someone begins tapping. It is a simple sound, a bone against a hollow piece of wood. Tap tap, a pause, 2 taps closer together. A child looks up. The old woman with the ochre smiles faintly without stopping her work. Another person answers by striking 2 stones lightly, not to make a tool this time, but to answer the pattern. The cave listens. Music leaves almost nobody behind, unlike stone blades or bones. Songs vanish into air as soon as they are made. Yet, archaeologists have found ancient instruments, including flutes made from bird bone and mammoth ivory in Ice Age Europe, dating back more than 35,000 years. Those finds reveal that sound was not merely accidental in prehistoric life. People shape material, so breath could become music. The tapping continues, soft enough not to disturb the sleepy warmth of the cave. A second rhythm joins it, made by fingers brushing over stretched hide. Someone hums. The hum is low, almost hidden beneath the fire. You do not know the tune, if tune is even the right word. It may not follow any pattern modern ears expect, but it rises and falls gently like a path over hills. You sit near the hearth and feel the sound in your chest more than your ears. The cave changes it. Stone gives the hum back in a faint echo. The tapping seems to come from the wall, then the floor, then the fire itself. Outside, wind moves at the entrance, adding a breathy tone of its own. The whole shelter becomes an instrument, though no one announces this, because ancient people were mercifully free from panel discussions. A small, easily missed detail is that some Ice Age flutes were made from the hollow bones of large birds. Bird bones are naturally light and tube-shaped, which makes them useful for producing sound. Imagine someone noticing that, not as a scientific diagram, but as a possibility held in the hand. A wing bone cleaned and pierced becomes a voice. It is one of those transformations that feels almost magical until you remember that human patience has always been a quiet kind of magic. The child with the smoothed red hand claps once too loudly, then laughs. An adult touches a finger to their lips, but not sternly. The child tries again, softer. Clap, tap, hum. The pattern grows. It is not a performance in the later sense. No stage, no audience sitting politely in rows. Everyone is inside it. Some make sound, some listen, Some work as they listen. One person appears to be falling asleep, sitting upright, which may be the oldest review of relaxing music. The day outside remains cold, but the cave warms with sound. The smell of cooked roots drifts from the hearth. Fat melts and hisses. Smoke folds into the roof, then slides toward the entrance. You feel the rough hide beneath you, the warmth against your knees, the cool stone behind your shoulder. The rhythm makes time feel softer. Work continues, but the edges of labor are rounded. There is still uncertainty around when and why humans first made music. Some researchers connect early music to courtship, bonding, ritual, teaching, or calming infants. Others suggest rhythm may have helped groups coordinate movement or remember stories because sound itself disappears. Specialists must rely on instruments. Cave acoustics wear marks and comparisons with living cultures while staying cautious. A flute proves music was possible, but it cannot tell us every song that was played or whose eyes grew heavy while listening. The hum changes, another voice joins higher and thinner than another, rougher, barely more than breath. The tones do not blend perfectly, and that makes them more intimate. They belong to tired bodies and cold mornings, to people who have worked hard and still choose to make the air beautiful. You imagine music in other places, along the long road, a rhythm tapped beside a river, a chant used while carrying loads, a lullaby murmured under hides during a storm, a dance near the end of a successful hunt, a mourning sound beside a grave, a playful tune made just to make children laugh. None of those sounds can be dug from the earth, but the possibility of them feels strong, because silence is rarely enough for human beings. Near midday, someone brings out a small object from a pouch. It is not the grand carved flute of a future museum, but a simple whistle made from bone. The person blows gently. A thin note trembles into the cave, pure and surprising. Everyone looks up. The note ends quickly, leaving a space that feels larger than before. The child asks for it with open hands. The adult hesitates, then allows a try. The result is not music exactly, is more like a startled bird being asked a difficult question. Few people laugh softly. The child beams proud beyond reason. Some achievements require no technical excellence. Afternoon light shifts at the cave entrance. The rhythm fades, then returns, now and then, as people work. You notice how the sounds help hold the group together. They do not erase grief. The burial outside remains part of the day. They do not remove hunger or cold, but they make the cave feel less like a shelter and more like a shared world. Modern life surrounds us with recorded music, playlists, speakers, songs that can follow us from room to room here. Every sound must be made by someone present. If the humming stops, it is gone. If the rhythm fades, it belongs to memory. There is something tender in that. Music is not a possession. It is an event breathed into being and released. Evening comes slowly. The sky beyond the entrance turns lavender, then deep blue. The group settles near the fire, and the tapping returns, softer now, sleepy and uneven. A low hum moves through the cave like warm smoke. The child finally lies down, one hand still faintly red, fingers curled near the face. You listen as the sound thins into quiet. No one in the far future will hear this song. No recording will survive. No written notes will explain it. Yet for this night, it is enough. It warms the space between people. It keeps fear outside the circle. It gives shape to breath. And when the last hum fades, the cave does not feel silent. It feels full. Morning arrives with the child's footprint in the snow. It is just outside the cave entrance, small and slightly sideways, pressed beside the deeper tracks of adults. The toes point toward the slope, then turn back again, as if the child stepped out bravely, reconsidered the entire concept of winter, and returned to the fire. The print is already softening around the edges. A few flakes have drifted into it. By noon, it may be gone. You pause over it longer than anyone else does. The group is awake behind you. Someone stirs embers. Someone coughs. Someone laughs quietly at a remark you do not fully understand, but can recognize as affectionate teasing. The cave smells of morning smoke, old hides, cooked roots, and damp stone. The red ochre marks from yesterday have faded further, leaving ghostly stains on skin and cloth. The music of the night before seems to linger, not a sound now, but as a calm feeling in the walls. Children move through the shelter like small weather system. One crouches near the hearth too close and is gently pulled back. Another drags a strip hide across the floor, pretending perhaps that it is an animal, a river, or simply an excellent thing to drag. The child with the painted hand now has only a pinkish smear across the knuckles and looks mildly offended by its disappearance. Another sits with a few bits of stone, arranging them in a line, then rearranging them, then guarding them as if they are the entire wealth of the group. It is easy when imagining prehistory to picture only adults, hunters, toolmakers, gatherers, elders, people striding nollie beneath enormous skies. But ancient communities were full of children. They had to be. Children learned, watched, played, helped, interrupted, explored, asked without words, and sometimes left traces so small they feel like whispers in several prehistoric sites. Researchers have found small footprints, child-size hand stencils, tiny tools, and marks that suggest young people were present in caves, camps, and working areas. You step back inside and sit near the warmth. The floor is cold, even through the hide beneath you. A little boy, or perhaps girl, it's hard to know from this distance of time, watches an older person twist plant fibers into cord. The child tries to copy the motion. The fibers fall apart. The older person takes the small hands, shows the twist again, and lets go. The child tries once more, producing something that is not corded so much as a botanical disagreement. The older person nods. Anyway, learning here is not separate from life. There is no schoolhouse, no bell, no little desk, no worksheet asking students to identify 3 uses of mammoth bone. Children learn by being near work. They watch how fire is fed, how hides are scraped, how tools are held, how plants are recognized, how sentence changes when danger is near. They learn where to step, when to wait, what to touch, and what absolutely not to put in their mouths. Although that last lesson is apparently universal and ongoing, a detail that often surprises people is that some archaeologists identify miniature or poorly made stone tools at ancient sites and consider whether they were made by children or beginners. Not every small object belongs to a child, of course, and not every clumsy flake is a lesson. Still, experimental work and use, where studies suggest that some artifacts may preserve practice. A child learning to strike stone could leave behind a little scatter of mistakes, and those mistakes can survive far longer than the proud smile that followed them. Outside, the day brightens. The snow begins to melt from exposed rocks. The group prepares to move, but slowly. Weather is watched. Tools are packed. Food is divided. Children are given small loads, not because their bundles matter greatly, but because carrying teaches belonging. One child receives a pouch with a few light objects, and immediately stands taller. Promoted to the rank of important person with responsibilities, you follow them down from the cave into the valley. The burial place lies quiet under frost behind you. No one stops there, but one adult touches the stones briefly while passing. The children notice. They may not understand everything, but they understand gestures. Childhood in this world includes tenderness and loss, play and hunger, warmth and fear. It is not simple, but neither is childhood now. The toys have changed. The serious business of growing up has not. The path leads toward a patch of open ground where the snow is thin and mud shows through. Here the children become lively. One runs ahead, then is called back. Another stamps deliberately in the soft ground, leaving deep marks. A third follows the adult tracks like stepping stones. Their laughter rises into the cold air, bright and brief. You look at the prints and think of ancient trackways where children's footprints have been preserved beside adult ones. At White Sands in New Mexico, for example, fossil footprints dating to the Ice Age have revealed humans moving across soft ground, including tracks of children and teenagers. Other sites around the world preserve small feet in mud, ash, or cave floors. Such traces remind us that the deep past was not inhabited only by solemn adults doing historically significant things. Sometimes, someone small simply ran. There is still careful discussion about how to interpret children's traces. Some specialists suggest certain marks and small objects show play, imitation, or learning. Others warn that size alone can mislead, and that footprints or handprints may not always reveal age, intention, or context as clearly as we would like. A child's track might be play, work, travel, or a moment of being carried and set down. The evidence is intimate, but it does not explain itself fully. By midday, the group rests near a stand of leafless trees. Sunlight slips between branches, weak but welcome. The children gather twigs, stones, and bits of bark. One makes a little arrangement in the dirt, perhaps a pretend hearth or animal pen, though animal pen is your modern imagination wandering ahead by several thousand years. Another child imitates the older hunter's crouched walk so dramatically that several adults smile. Play, you realize, is practice wearing a softer face. A child pretending to track may one day track. Child carrying sticks may one day carry firewood. Child copying tools may one day make tools well enough to help others survive. But play is also simply joy. It does not need a future use to matter, even in a hard world. Laughter is not wasteful. The afternoon grows colder again. Clouds gather over the ridge, and the group begins walking toward lower shelter. One tired child is lifted and carried on an adult's hip. The child's head rests against a shoulder, eyes half closed, fingers still holding a useless but treasured twig. The adult adjusts the weight without complaint. That image stays with you. Prehistoric childhood could be dangerous. Yes, illness, cold injury, hunger, and predators were real. But danger does not erase care. Someone carried children. Someone fed them softened food. Someone showed them tools. Someone laughed at their mistakes. Someone marked their hands with ochre. Someone made room for them near the fire. Evening comes beside a low cluster of trees where there's a group makes camp. The fire catches slowly, then brightens. Children settle close, tired at last, which feels like a minor miracle in any era. The sky darkens. Smoke rises. Adult voices become low and steady. One child's small feet, washed clean by snow and mud, tuck under a hide. You sit in the firelight and understand that the hidden 80,000 years were not only made by those who hunted, migrated, painted, buried, and shaped stone. They were also made by children watching, copying, laughing, stumbling, learning, and leaving tiny prints in places where time, by some strange kindness, decided to remember them. The next morning, the air changes before the land does. You feel it as soon as you rise from the hide covering. A wide coldness moving across the camp from somewhere far beyond the trees. Smells of snow, dry grass, old stone, and distance. The fire has burned low, but even the embers seem sharper in this air. Their red glow bright against the grey dawn around you. People wake quietly, pulling coverings tighter around their shoulder. The children are slower today. Adults are slower too, though they hide it better. The night has been cold, and the ground is hard beneath the thin sleeping places. Someone stamps their feet near the fire. Someone flecks his stiff fingers over the heat. A strip of dried meat is passed around, tough enough to remind everyone that breakfast is not always an emotional experience. By mid-morning, the group leaves the sheltered trees and steps onto an open plain. The world widens before you, stretches a rolling cold landscape of grass, low shrubs, frozen pools, and distant herds. The sky is enormous, pale blue near the horizon and white above, with clouds stretched thin like pulled wool. Wind moves freely here, sliding over the plain without asking permission. It pushes against your chest, slips under your clothing, and makes your eyes water. This is Ice Age country, though not an endless white wasteland. During parts of the last Ice Age, huge areas of Eurasia and North America included a dry, cold environment, often called mammoth steppe. It supported grasses, herbs, shrubs, and large animals such as mammoths, horses, bison, reindeer, and woolly rhinoceroses to modernize. It can seem harsh, but to the animals adapted to it, and to the humans who learned its patterns, it was a living world full of signs. You walk with the group along a low ridge where visibility is good. No one speaks much. The plain encourages quiet. Sound travels strangely here. A distant bird call seems near. The crunch of your steps on frozen soil sounds too loud. Grass stems tick against each other in the wind. Somewhere ahead, a herd moves like a dark stain across the pale land. Mammoths. At first they look like boulders with breath. Then one lifts its head, and you see the curve of tusks, the shaggy coat, the massive shoulders. Steam rises from them in the cold. They move slowly, feeding as they go, sweeping snow and dry grass aside with trunks. Young ones stand close to adults, partially hidden among legs and hair. The sight is both grand and strangely gentle, like watching weather decide to become an animal. The group stops below the ridge. No one rushes. No one cheers. Ancient people understood very well that large animals were not symbols placed conveniently in the landscape for human destiny. They were dangerous, intelligent, heavy, and quite capable of ruining a person's afternoon forever. Hunting them when it happened required planning, cooperation, tools, courage, and luck was not casual. Evidence from Ice Age sites shows that humans hunted and scavenged large animals, including mammoths, in some regions, but they also relied on a broad diet that could include smaller game, fish, birds, roots, seeds, berries, and stored foods. The popular image of prehistoric people constantly battling giant beasts is a little too dramatic, rather like assuming modern life is mostly car chases, 'cause movies seem enthusiastic about them. Most mills came from patient effort, not cinematic glory. Glory, you crouch with the others behind a line of low shrubs. The wind carries animal smell toward your warm hide. Dung, trampled grass, and the faint musky scent of a herd. The mammoths are upwind, which matters. People hear no scent as carefully as sight. One hunter lifts a hand, testing the direction. Another studies the ground for tracks and frozen droppings. A third watches the younger animals. The children remain farther back with two adults. They're quiet now, sensing the seriousness in the group. One child clutches a small pouch, eyes wide, face half hidden in fur. Even children who were loud an hour ago can become silent when everyone else does. This, too, is little learning. A lesser-known piece of Ice Age life is that mammoth bones were sometimes used by humans as building material in regions where wood was scarce. Archaeologists have found structures made partly from mammoth bones in Eastern Europe, with tusks, skulls, and long bones arranged into shelters. Sounds like something from a fantasy illustration, but it was practical. When the land gives few trees and many large bones, people become very inventive. Interior decorating was probably not the main concern, but still, one imagines it made an impression. The group does not attack the herd. Not today. The animals are too many, too alert, and the ground between them is too open. Instead, the hunters watch. They collect information, where the herd moves, which direction the wind favors, whether an animal limps, where the land dips into a shallow ravine. Patience is survival wearing a quiet face. Interpretations of mammoth hunting still vary among researchers. Some emphasize the skill and coordination needed for humans to kill large Ice Age animals, pointing to kill sites, cut marks, and tools. Others stress that scavenging, selective hunting, environmental stress, and animal behavior all played roles, and that humans were only one part of a much larger ecological story. The disappearance of many large Ice Age mammals near the end of the Pleistocene is also debated, with climate change, human pressure, and combined causes all considered. You follow the group as it moves along the ridge, parallel to the herd. The wind grows stronger. It carries snow grains that sting lightly against your face. Your feet are cold, your fingers colder, and yet the landscape has a stark beauty that makes you keep looking. Grass bends in silver waves. A raven circles overhead. The mammoths darken against a dick of the plain, slow and immense. Near a frozen pool, the group finds older tracks. Mammoth prints are wide, deep circles pressed into mud before it hardened. Smaller prints cross them. Perhaps wolf, fox, hare, bird. The ground is a page written by many lives. One hunter kneels and touches the edge of a print. Another points to a smear where an animal may have slipped. They speak softly, not with excitement, but with analysis. The plain is being read. By afternoon, clouds thicken. The herd has moved farther west, becoming a dark line under the pale sky. The group turns toward a cluster of low rocks, where they can shelter from the wind. There they build a small fire in a hollow, feeding it with dry shrubs and carried embers. The flames struggle, then steady. Everyone gathers close. Food is shared. Not mammoth, not today, but dried meat, roots, and something cracked from a bone safe from an earlier meal. The children chew sleepily. The adults look out across the plain. You understand that living here means accepting uncertainty without making it theatrical. Some days offer plenty, some offer only signs. Some days the wise choice is to watch and remember. Evening spreads slowly over the mammoth plain. The herd is almost gone now, swallowed by distance and weather. Only the tracks remain nearby, frozen into the ground. The fire gives off a thin warmth. Smoke is torn sideways by the wind before it can rise. You sit with your back to the rocks and listen to the plain breathe around you. The cold, the animals, the hunger, the knowledge, the patience, all of it belongs together. Humans did not stand outside nature here. They moved inside it, vulnerable and clever. One species among many, trying to read the world before the world changed its mind. Far away, a mammoth calls low and deep, more vibration than sound. The group falls quiet, and beneath the first stars. The great plain keeps moving in darkness, carrying herds, wind, footprints, and the small orange glow of human fire. The mammoth plain lingers behind you as the group travels into rougher country where limestone ridges rise from the cold earth and dark openings appear in the hillsides. The wind is quieter here, broken by stone. Snow rests in the cracks of rocks and in the shadows of low shrubs. The air smells of frost, wet mineral, and the faint smoke from the embers carried carefully in a wrapped bundle. By late afternoon, you reach a cave unlike the practical shelter used before. This entrance is narrower. It does not welcome the whole group with easy warmth. It seems to draw sound inward. The mouth of it is dark, even while the sky outside remains pale. A few people stop before it, and their manner changes. Tools are adjusted. Torches are prepared. Children are kept near the outer rocks, watched by adults who are very clear that wandering into mysterious holes is not a charming personality trait. The group does not enter all at once. Only a few go in. You follow them past the threshold, and the temperature drops. The cave breathes cool air against your face. The floor slopes gently downward, uneven beneath your feet. A torch flares ahead, smelling of resin, smoke, and animal fat. Its flame bends and shivers, throwing light against the walls in restless patches. Every footstep sounds too close. Every drip from the stone seems deliberate. Deep caves were not ordinary living rooms. Many painted caves from Ice Age Europe, such as Chauvet, Lascaux, and Alamera, contain images far from daylight, in chambers that would have required lamps or torches to reach. These paintings often show animals, horses, bison, lions, rhinoceroses, mammoths, deer, and other creatures of the prehistoric world. They were made tens of thousands of years ago with pigments such as charcoal, manganeses, and ochre, and sometimes with engraved or scraped lines. You move deeper. The torchlight slides across a wall, and suddenly an animal appears. At first, it's only a curve, then a shoulder, then the sweep of a back, the bend of a horn, the heavy head of a bison, seeming to emerge from the stone itself. The wall is not flat. Its natural bulges become muscle. A crack becomes a line of the body. Shadow gives the animal breath. The painter did not simply place an image on stone. They listened to the stone, then help the animal out. You stand still, 'cause it feels rude to move too quickly. More figures gather in the darkness. Horses with arched necks, deer with fine legs, a mammoth outlined in dark strokes. Some are painted over older marks, layered like memories. Some are simple, some are astonishingly alive. The torch flickers, and the animals seem to shift. A horse's head lifts. A bison's flank pulses. Of course, it is only light, stone, and your tired eyes. But then again, perhaps people came here partly because torchlight makes still things restless. One fascinating feature of cave art is how often artists use the shape of the cave wall itself. Bulges, hollows, cracks, and ridges could become parts of animal bodies. In some places, engraved lines are nearly invisible until light strikes from the side. This means the art was not always meant to be viewed like a framed picture in a bright museum. It may have been experienced through movement, darkness, flame, and closeness, which is wonderfully inconvenient for anyone trying to take a quick photo. The person carrying the torch raises it higher. Smoke curls black along the ceiling. Another person kneels near the wall with pigment. You watch a hand move slowly, adding a line where the stone already suggests a back. The gesture is careful, almost tender. No one speaks much. The cave holds silence the way a bowl holds water. There is an old mark nearby, a hand stencil, pale around the edges. Someone long before this moment pressed a hand to the stone and blew pigment around it, leaving the shape of absence. You raise your own hand near it without touching. The fingers are spread. The palm is human. That is the stunning thing. Across the enormous distance, a hand still says here, not with a sentence, not with a name, just here. Archaeologists have found many hand stencils in prehistoric caves, and some researchers have tried to study finger lengths, sizes, and placement to understand who made them. The results are debated, but one possibility is that men, women, and young people all took part in marking cave walls in different places. The old picture of a lone male hunter artist has become less certain. History, like most things, was probably less tidy and more interested. Clear, interesting. The deeper chamber smells of smoke, damp stone, and earth. Your skin prickles in the cold. The torch makes small clicking sounds as resin burns. A drop of water falls from the ceiling and strikes stone with a clear note. You feel the cave pressing around you. Not hostile, just immense and indifferent, like night made solid. Why paint here? This question has followed these images since modern people first recognized their age. Some experts have suggested hunting magic, as if painting animals helped people succeed in the same way. Others have seen spiritual journeys, teaching, storytelling, memory, group identity, trance, play, or relationships with the animals themselves. The truth may not be one thing. Different caves, different times. Different groups may have used images in different ways. A bison can be food, danger, beauty, ancestor, teacher, and mystery, all at once. You move into another chamber where the ceiling lowers. The torchlight reveals dots, lines and signs that do not resemble animals. Rows of marks, branching shapes, crossed strokes. These are quieter than the painted horses, but they may be just as important. Some researchers think such signs could represent shared symbols, perhaps carrying meaning known to the group. Others remain cautious, because a mark can be meaningful without being readable to us. It is easy to want the path to speak clearly. It rarely does. The group pauses near a panel of horses. One person begins to hum very softly, almost beneath hearing. The sound from section 12 returns in memory. The cave turning breath into something larger. The hum gathers against the wall and comes back, changed. The animals seem to listen. You do too. There is no sudden revelation, no dramatic secret unlocked. Just people in darkness holding fire, facing images made by human hands. That is enough. Eventually, the torch burns lower, the smell grows thicker, and the group begins to turn back. The painted animals recede one by one into darkness. The hand stencil vanishes. The bison becomes a curve. Then, nothing. You follow the small flame toward the entrance where the outside world glows faintly blue. Cold evening air touches your face as you step out. It feels wide after the cave's closeness. The children wait near the rocks, sleepy and curious. One asks something and receives a quiet answer. Perhaps they will enter one day. Perhaps they already have. Perhaps the cave is not for every moment, but for certain times when the ordinary world needs a doorway into something deeper. The group builds camp near the entrance, not inside. The fire catches under a sheltering ledge. Food is shared. Hides are spread above. Stars appear slowly behind you in the hill. The painted animals wait in darkness. You sit by the fire and think of torchlight moving across stone, of red and black lines, of hands without names, of breath turning to hum in a hidden chamber. Scientists will study these caves for centuries, measuring pigment, dating charcoal, mapping walls, arguing gently over meaning. But tonight, the cave does not explain itself. It simply holds its dreams underground and under the quiet stars. You let those dreams fade softly into sleep. The morning after the painted cave is bright and bitterly cold. Frost has thickened over the grass near the ledge, and the stones shine where a thin glaze of ice catches the first light behind you. The cave entrance sits dark and quiet, holding its painted animals somewhere inside the hill. No one speaks of them loudly. The images seem to have followed the group back into daylight, not as a story to be repeated carelessly, but as a feeling carried under the ribs. The camp stirs slowly. Hides are lifted and shaken. Ash is stirred. Children blink in the sharp light, wrapped like small bundles of complaint. The wind moves down from the ridge and slips through every gap in clothing, reminding everyone that beauty underground is lovely. But warmth is still the main project. Today's a day of mending. The group does not travel far. Weather is changing. Clouds gather beyond the hills, low and grey, and the older people watch them with serious eyes. A storm may come by evening, so the morning is given to clothing, coverings, straps, bags, and all the quiet work that keeps cold from becoming dangerous. You sit near the fire and watch a woman take out a slender bone needle. It is smooth, pale, and carefully shaped with a tiny eye pierced near one end. She threads it with sinew, dampened, and twisted till it can pass through the hole. Her fingers are cracked from cold, but precise. Beside her lies a hide, scraped, softened, stretched, and cut into pieces that will fit the body, not elegantly, perhaps in the modern sense. No one is doing a runway show on the Mammoth Plain. Still, the care is unmistakable. Needles made from bone and ivory are among the important tools of the Ice Age. They allowed people to sew fitted clothing, bags, and shelters, which made life in colder climates far more manageable. Simple draped hides can keep a person warm, but stitched garments fit closer, trap heat better, and allow movement in harsh environments. Tailoring was not a luxury. It was survival with seams. The needle passes through hide with a soft push. The woman pulls the sinew tight. The seam closes little again. Push, pull, tighten. The rhythm is calm and repetitive, almost sleepy. Smoke drifts across the work area, making your eyes water faintly. The hide smells of animal fat, smoke, and the sharp, clean scent of cold air. A young person sits beside her, learning. Their first stitches are uneven, loose in one place, crowded in another. The woman does not take the work away. She points, adjusts, demonstrates, then lets the learner continue. Clothing carries lessons. Every seam teaches tension, spacing, patience, and the mild heartbreak of realizing you have sewn something crooked. One clue tucked into the evidence is how much effort prehistoric people put into soft technologies that do not always survive well. Plant fibers, leather, fur, sinew, wooden frames, baskets, nets, and bags decay easily, especially compared with stone. So, the archaeological record can make ancient life look more stone-heavy than it really was. In truth, much of daily survival may have depended on perishable things: cords, knots, wrappings, pouches, mats, and stitched layers that disappeared long before anyone could place them in a display case. You look around and begin to see them everywhere. A cord ties a bundle of tools. A stitched bag holds red pigment. A child's covering is patched at the shoulder. A water skin hangs from a branch. A hide boot, if that's the right word, is stuffed with dry grass for warmth. These objects are humble, flexible, and easier to overlook. But without them, the group would lose food, warmth, mobility, and time civilization when it comes much later. We'll be very proud of its monuments. But here, a good knot may matter more than a stone tower. The wind strengthens by midday. It presses smoke low to the ground before lifting it away. The group shifts closer to the sheltering rocks. Someone brings out strips of fur and lays them near the fire to dry. Another uses a scraper to thin a hide where it is stiffened. A child is given a blunt bone point and allowed to poke holes in a scrap. The child concentrates intensely, tongue at the corner of the mouth, as if performing delicate surgery on behalf of all humanity. A detail easy to miss is that eyed needles appear in the archaeological record around 40,000 years ago in some regions. Though simplers and piercing tools are older, the arrival of fine sewing tools may connect to more fitted clothing, especially in cold climates. This does not mean everyone suddenly dressed in perfectly tailored outfits, but it does suggest that people were solving the problem of winter with increasing skill. Fashion magazines were still some way off, which was probably restful. You reach out and touch a finished garment lying beside the fire. The outer layer is coarse, fur turned outward in places. The inside is softer, worn smooth by use. Seams are thick but strong. The texture is heavy in your hands. It smells of smoke, body warmth, fat, and weather. This is not a costume from a museum. It is a portable shelter. There is no single agreement about how quickly tailored clothing developed or how it varied from place to place. Specialists use needles, hide working tools, climate evidence, and even studies of human lice to explore when people began wearing more complex clothing. Clothing lice, oddly enough, may help estimate when garments became common enough to create a separate habitat for them. History is full of grand discoveries, and then occasionally, it taps you on the shoulder with lice. One must remain humble. By afternoon, snow begins again. At first, it is light, a few flakes drifting past the ledge. Then the sky thickens, and the flakes multiply until the plain beyond the rocks blurs into white motion. The group pulls hides tighter around the work area. The fire is fed more often. Children are drawn closer. The painted cave behind you is no longer the deepest darkness. The storm has made daylight itself feel enclosed. Inside this pale weather, sewing continues. Push, pull, tighten. A torn seam is repaired before it can widen. A boot is patched. A carrying bag is reinforced with a strip of hide. A sleeping cover is shaken, dried, and stitched, where sparks have burned tiny holes. Every repair is a refusal to waste. Every patch says the group expects tomorrow and intends to meet it repaired. The warmth near the fire becomes precious. You feel it on your face, while your back remains cold. Snow melts in your hair and chills your neck. Someone hands you a strip of warmed hide to hold, and the heat stored in it is surprisingly comforting. The group speaks softly over the storm. There is humor in the complaints. There is always humor, even when the wind is rude. Evening arrives early under the clouds. The world outside the ledge becomes a grey-white curtain. The fire glows brighter by contrast. Turning the stitched garments gold at the edges, the woman finishes the seam and tests it with a firm pull. It holds. She gives the garment to the learner, who looks proud, tired, and perhaps slightly relieved that the hide has not betrayed them. You watch the group settle beneath layers they made with their own hands. Hides overlap. Fur traps warmth. Bags become pillows. Children curl into adults. The storm moves over the rocks with a low, steady sound. Without needles, without sinew, without patient repair, this night would be far harder. So you listen to snow hiss softly beyond the firelight and understand that survival is not always loud. Sometimes it is a small needle passing through the hide, again and again, making warmth one careful stitch at a time. The storm passes during the night, leaving the morning strangely clean. Snow lies in soft folds around the rocks, and the sky above is pale and open, as if the weather has spent all its anger and now feels slightly embarrassed. The fire has survived under careful hands. Its embers glow beneath ash, patient and red, waiting to be woken. You rise into cold air that touches your face like water. Around you, the group begins the day, slowly shaking snow from hides, checking seams repaired yesterday, and stamping warmth back into feet. The stitched clothing holds, the patched bags hold. The little repairs made by firelight have become part of everyone's comfort, which is the sort of Victoria history rarely celebrates, but bodies appreciate immediately. Today, no one travels far. The snow has covered tracks and hidden stones. The plain beyond the sheltering rocks looks smooth and uncertain, so the group remains near the fire, and the camp becomes its own small world. Wood is gathered from places where branches stayed dry. Food is shared. Tools are checked. Children are sent on extremely important missions involving twigs, which they perform with the gravity of officials. By midday, the fire burns strongly in a shallow pit sheltered from the wind. People gather in a loose circle around it. Older adults, skilled hunters, gatherers, toolmakers, children, and those whose roles shift according to need. No one here is only one thing. A person who hunts may also mend. A person who gathers may also tell stories. A person who cares for children may know the safest path through a valley. The group survives through overlapping knowledge, not neat job titles. Human resources has not yet arrived, and morale is probably better for it. Small mobile communities like this here, likely to depended on cooperation, sharing, and social memory in hunter-gatherer societies studied today. Knowledge is often distributed across the group. Some people know plants, others animal behavior, others tool-making, weather, stories, kinship, or distant places. While no living community is a perfect window into the Ice Age, these comparisons help researchers imagine how prehistoric people may have organized daily life without kings, coins, written laws, or anyone scheduling a meeting that could have been a conversation by the fire. You sit close enough to feel heat through your clothing. The fire cracks softly. Melt water drips from a rock nearby, striking snow with tiny dark marks. The air smells of smoke, leather, singed hair, and something cooking slowly in embers. The group's faces are relaxed today, not free from worry, but softened by the pause. An elder begins speaking. You have heard this voice before, low and steady, carrying the weight of memory. The words themselves remain beyond you, but the shape is clear. This is not idle chatter. People turn toward the speaker. A child stops scraping snow with a stick. A young adult leans forward. The elder gestures toward the plain, then toward the distant ridge, then toward the sky. The story may be about a journey, a dangerous animal, an ancestor, a mistake, a rule, or all of these woven together. Oral storytelling was likely one of humanity's most important tools long before writing. Stories can preserve roots, warn about hazards, explain animal behavior, strengthen group identity, teach children, and make grief bearable. In a world where knowledge is carried in memory, a good story is not entertainment only. It is storage, instruction, comfort, and social glue. With better lighting than most classrooms, the elder's hands move as the story unfolds. One hand becomes an animal head, fingers become antlers. A sudden tilt of the body makes several children smile, recognizing a familiar part. Someone else adds a brief sound, perhaps imitating wind or a bird. The circle responds softly. This is not a performance separated from the listeners, it is shared. The story belongs to everyone who knows when to laugh, when to hush, and when to remember. A small detail often overlooked in discussions of prehistoric survival is the importance of older people. In many foraging societies, elders contribute knowledge, childcare, tool skills, plant expertise, and memory of rare events, such as droughts, migrations, or dangerous places. An elder who can no longer travel quickly may still hold information that helps the group endure. Deep history was not only shaped by the strongest legs, sometimes it was shaped by the person who remembered what happened last time the river froze. Too early, you look at the elder's face in firelight. Lines gather around the eyes. The skin is weathered, marked by cold, sun, smoke, and years. This person has likely seen children born, hunters injured, seasons fail, animals vanish, and camps revisited after long absence. Every memory is a tool of another kind. The debate here is subtle. Researchers can see evidence of care for injured individuals in some ancient remains, including cases where people survive serious conditions for years. They can also study age profiles in burials and skeletal remains. But how elders were treated, how authority worked, and how decisions were made remain difficult to know. Some specialists imagine flexible discussion-based leadership with influence depending on skill and circumstance. Others caution that social life surely varied widely across time and region. One camp might follow the best tracker during travel, the best healer during sickness, and the most patient person when children become unreasonable. The story continues into afternoon. It is interrupted by work, because life rarely allows art to have the room it deserves. Someone turns food in the ashes. Someone repairs a binding. A child needs comfort after falling into snow with great personal betrayal. Yet the story returns, picking up where it left off. Everyone seems to know its path. You realize this may be how memory stays alive, not in one formal telling, but in fragments, repeated over days, seasons, and years. You hear laughter then, gentle and low. The elder has reached a funny part, even without understanding the words. You can tell someone in the story behaved foolishly. The listeners enjoy this enormously. There is tenderness in teasing the absent, especially if the absent is an ancestor who once made a poor choice near a river and has never been allowed to escape it. Modern people often save knowledge in devices, books, clouds, archives, and folders named Final Version, followed by Final Version 2, followed by Actual Final Version. Here, the archive breathes. It sits by the fire. It forgets sometimes, remember suddenly corrects itself when another listener interrupts, and passes into children through repetition. Evening comes with clear cold. Stars appear one by one above the white plain. The fire circle tightens. People eat together, passing food in small portions. The elder story has become softer now, less animated, more like a chant or a memory nearing sleep. Children lean against adults. One small head nods forward, wakes, then nods again. You feel the circle holding more than warmth. It holds relationships. Who shares with whom? Who listens? Who teaches? Who jokes? Who notices the quiet person at the edge and passes food their way? Society begins here, not in stone buildings or written law, but in repeated acts of attention. The fire burns lower, sparks rise into the dark and vanish among stars so bright they seem close enough to warm your hands around you. The group settles under repaired hides and stitched coverings. The elder falls silent at last, but the story remains in everyone, glowing faintly like an ember under ash. You sit a little longer, listening to breathing wind and the small crackle of wood. The fire circle is fragile. A storm could scatter it. Hunger could test it. Time will erase the voices, but tonight it is whole. And in the hidden years before history had pages, this circle is where memory sleeps, wakes, and is carried forward. The fire circle remains in your thoughts as morning opens over the snowplain. The elder's story has ended, but something of it stays in the camp, tucked into gestures and glances, into the way a young person checks the ridge before anyone asks, into the way a child repeats one small movement from the tale and makes another child laugh. Stories do not vanish when the voice stops. They settle into people. The group travels again when the sun is high enough to soften the cold. The snow is thin here, brushed aside by the wind in long, pale streaks. Beneath it, the ground is dark and hard. The air smells clean with a dry bite that catches in your throat. The distant hills look blue under the winter sky, and for a while, everyone walks without speaking, as if the plain itself asks for quiet. Oh, asks. The path leads away from the open mammoth country and into a region of broken cliffs, tinians, and narrow valleys. The landfills folded full of hidden corners, caves open in the rock faces like half-closed eyes. Streams run under ice. Animal tracks cross and vanish. It is a place where other groups might pass nearby without ever being seen. And in this hidden country, you begin to think of people known mostly through whispers of evidence. Not just Homo sapiens, not only Neanderthals, others too. In the deep human past, our species shared the world with several close relatives. Denisovans are among the most mysterious. They were identified not first from a complete skeleton, but from DNA recovered from tiny fossil fragments found in Denisova Cave in Siberia. A fingerbone teeth. Later, more genetic clues appeared from other places, including the Tibetan plateau. It is a strange way to meet a human relative, through a fragment so small it could rest in your palm, yet carrying a whole vanished population inside it. You walk beside the group through a narrow valley where snow clings to shaded stones. A raven moves along the cliff edge, black against pale rock. The camp behind you is gone from sight ahead. Smoke rises faintly from somewhere beyond the trees, then disappears. Perhaps it is only mist. Perhaps another group is there. Perhaps no one. The deep past is full of such almost sightings. Denisovans did not leave behind the rich visual record we associate with some Ice Age caves, at least not clearly. They are known mostly from genetics and a small number of fossils, yet their DNA survives in some modern human populations, especially in parts of Oceania, East Asia, and among some indigenous groups. This means that, like Neanderthals, they did not entirely vanish in the simplest sense. Traces of them live on in people today, quiet inheritances carried in blood, skin, immune systems, altitude adaptation, and ancestry. You pause near a frozen stream while the group drinks from a place where ice has been broken. The water is so cold it aches in the teeth. Someone rubs their hands together and breathes into them. A child complains softly and is offered a warmer wrap. Across the stream, the dark mouth of a small cave opens beneath a leaning pine. No one enters it, but everyone notices. A small clue from the Denisov story is almost comically modest. One of the first fossils linked to them was part of a little finger bone from a young girl. From that fragment, scientists recovered DNA that revealed an unknown human group. Imagine that. Not a monument, not a skull displayed grandly in stone, just a piece of a child's hand, quiet in a cave, waiting tens of thousands of years to change the human family tree. The past does enjoy dramatic timing, even when using very small props. The group moves on, climbing a slope where the snow thins under pine needles. The smell of resin strengthens, branches cake softly overhead. Somewhere in the trees, something small rustles and then goes still. You follow an adult who carries a bundle of tools and embers wrapped carefully to protect the fire. The path is difficult, but the group knows how to spread effort. The strong help the tired. The alert guide the distracted. The patient rescue children from deep philosophical arguments with their own feet. As you walk, you feel the family tree of humanity becoming less like a tree and more like a thicket. Branches cross, roots mingle, paths divide, and meet again for a long time. Many people imagined human evolution as a neat ladder leading to us, each step replacing the one below. But evidence now suggests a more tangled story, with different human groups overlapping, meeting, mixing, and disappearing in ways still being pieced together. There is no full agreement about how many kinds of humans lived during these hidden years, or how often they met. Fossils are rare. DNA survives only under certain conditions. Some populations may be known from a few bones, others only from traces in modern genomes. Specialists keep revising the picture as new finds appear. The story is careful, unfinished, and wonderfully humbling. Just when modern humans begin to feel like the obvious main characters, a tiny finger bone politely clears its throat. By afternoon, the group reaches a sheltered ledge above a valley. From here, you can see far across the folded land. Smoke rises in two distant places now, faint and thin, separated by miles. Your group notices both. No one knows who made them. Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Denis, some other population not yet named by future science, or simply a fire left from yesterday. Still breathing under ash, the uncertainty changes the air. Not fear exactly, more like awareness. The world is inhabited by possibilities. The group does not approach the smoke. They settle under the ledge, where stone blocks the wind. A fire is made. Snow is brushed from sleeping places. Someone sets snares near the brush. Someone else sorts tools, checking edges in the low light. The children are quieter than usual, perhaps tired from climbing, perhaps sensing the adults' careful attention. Evening folds into the valley. The two distant smoke threads fade one after the other. The sky becomes violet. The first stars appear, and the cold deepens. You sit near the fire and think of vanished cousins, whose faces are mostly unknown. Denisovans, Neanderthals, other groups whose bones may still lie hidden, or whose traces have already dissolved into earth. They lived, moved, ate, slept, taught their young, and looked into fires under night skies. They were not clues to themselves. They were people inside their own present. Someone begins a low hum absent-mindedly, and it reminds you of the cave music. The sound is small against the valley, but it is enough to warm the circle. The elder looks toward the dark ridge and says something brief. The others listen. Perhaps it is a warning about strangers, perhaps a memory of a meeting, perhaps a story about people beyond the hills who speak differently, trade rarely, and leave unusual tools behind. The fire brightens, then lowers. Sparks rise into the coal. You understand that the hidden 80,000 years were not a lonely corridor leading only to us. They were crowded with relatives, neighbors, meetings, losses, and mingled inheritances. Some names we know now, others may never return. But in the dark, between the cliffs, the human story feels wider, stranger, and gentler than a ladder. It feels like many fires seen from a distance. The distant fires disappear by morning, leaving only pale sky above the folded valley. For a while, you wonder whether you truly saw them. Smoke can be uncertain at a distance. Mist can pretend. Memory can polish a faint line into a sign. Yet the group behaves as if the land has become more crowded in their minds. They move carefully, listening before they speak, watching ridges, checking the snow for tracks that are not animal. The path turns southward, away from the colder cliffs, and toward lower ground, where the air softens slightly. Snow thins to wet patches. Grass shows through in dull green and brown. The soil becomes darker, richer, and it clings to feet in heavy clumps after days of stone ice and open wind. This land feels almost generous. By midday, the group reaches a sheltered basin where a stream curls around a flat stretch of earth. The place is not a village, not yet. No permanent houses stand here. No fields lie in neat lines, but people have clearly returned to this basin before. You see old hearth stains, cracked stones, piles of discarded shell and bone, and places where plants grow thickly around disturbed soil. The camp has the feeling of a remembered room under the open sky. The world is still deep in the age before farming, but small habits are beginning to matter. In many places before formal agriculture, people gathered wild grains, nuts, roots, fruits, and seeds, sometimes returning season after season to the same productive areas. They may have stored foods, managed landscapes with fire, encouraged useful plants, or learned which patches responded well to disturbance. Farming did not appear from nowhere one morning with a basket and a confident announcement. It grew slowly from attention. You walk into the basin and feel mud soften under your steps. The smell is earthy and damp with hints of green shoots, wet bark, and old ash. Birds call from shrubs near the stream. Insects move in the warmer pockets of air, small and persistent. The children notice them first, because children are excellent witnesses to anything tiny, crawling, and inconvenient. The group settles with a sense of familiarity. Bundles are lowered in places that seem already chosen. Someone clears old ash from a hearth and builds a new fire over the mark. Another person checks a pit lined with stones and covered by branches. Inside are stored foods, perhaps nuts, dried roots, or seeds protected from damp and animals. The discovery brings relief, not excitement exactly, but the quiet satisfaction of finding that past effort has waited faithfully. Food storage changed the rhythm of life when people could preserve and protect seasonal abundance. Even in small amounts, they had more choices. Stored food could help during lean days, support longer stays in one place, or allow groups to return to reliable locations did not make life easy. Mice, rot, insects, and moisture were all deeply committed opponents. Still, a cashier of food was a promise made by yesterday to tomorrow. You sit near the stream as several people begin gathering seeds from tall grasses. They hold baskets beneath the seed heads and strip them with practiced motions. The sound is faint, dry, and soothing. Seeds patter into woven containers like light rain. Nearby, someone digs roots with a sharpened stick, loosening soil around the plant rather than tearing wildly. Another adult shows a child which plants to leave alone so they may grow again. A small clue from the long transition toward farming is that grinding stones appear at many prehistoric sites, sometimes with traces of starch or plant residues. These tools suggest people processed wild plants long before full agriculture. Grinding seeds into meal is slow work. It requires patience, rhythm, and a willingness to spend time turning something small and hard into something edible. It's also the kind of task that makes modern kitchen appliances seem almost suspiciously luxurious. You watch a woman kneel by a flat stone and pour seeds onto it. She uses a rounded handstone to crush them back and forth, back and forth. The motion is steady enough to quiet the mind. Pale meal gathers at the stone's edge. A child tries to help, pushing too lightly at first, then too hard, scattering seeds in a way that suggests enthusiasm has once again outrun technique. The woman sighs, gathers them back, and guides the child's hands. This basin is not a farm, but it is full of relationships with plants. People know when the grasses ripen, when nuts fall thickest, which roots fatten after rain, which berries dry well, and which seeds must be heated, soaked, pounded, or avoided, unless one has made peace with a very uncomfortable evening. Knowledge of plants is not secondary to hunting. It is central, quiet, and often carried by those whose expertise rarely survives as dramatically as spear points. The path from foraging to farming remains one of the great careful puzzles of human history in several regions of the world. Agriculture developed independently after the last ice age, including in the Near East, China, New Guinea, parts of Africa, Mesoamerica, the Andes and elsewhere. But the reasons are not reduced to one cause: climate change, population pressure, social choices, storage, local plants, animal behavior, and long familiarity with seasonal landscapes all likely played roles. People did not simply discover farming as if opening a door. They adjusted, experimented, remembered, and sometimes became trapped by their own success. Afternoon light warms the basin. The fire burns with a gentle, steady glow. Seeds dry on woven mats. Roots roast slowly in ash. The smell becomes sweet and nutty, mixing with smoke and damp earth. A few people repair baskets, tightening the weave with strips of plant fiber. The baskets are beautiful, in the way useful things become beautiful when made by skilled hands. Stone survives better, but baskets may have carried more of daily life than stone ever did. One easy detail to miss is that early plant use would have included many perishable tools: digging sticks, carrying nets, barn, woven containers, mats, and storage bags. Most decay and vanish, leaving only rare impressions in clay, charred fragments, or indirect clues. So the ancient world we reconstruct is biased toward what lasts. It is like judging a household only by its broken knives and fireplace ash, then wondering why nobody owned blankets. As evening lowers, the group gathers around the hearth. Food is shared, and the meal feels different from dried meat on the windy plain. It is softer, warmer, more settled. Roasted roots steam in the cold air. Ground seeds are mixed with water and cooked into a rough cake near the embers. The texture is coarse, but the smell is comforting, almost familiar. You think of bread, porridge, rice, tortillas, all the later foods that will grow from long human patience with plants. Someone points toward the thick stand of grass beyond the stream and speaks to a child. Perhaps they are explaining when to return. Perhaps they're warning not to trample patch. Perhaps they're simply saying that tomorrow there will be more work, which is not the most magical sentence in any era, but often the most accurate. Night settles gently over the basin. The stars appear between thin clouds. The stream reflects little pieces of sky. The stored food pit is covered again. The baskets are brought close to the shelter. The fire hums softly in its bed of ash. You feel that something has shifted, though no one names it. The group is still mobile. The wild world still feeds them. But here, besides seeds, storage, remembered plants, and a hearth returned to again, the future has begun to lean closer. Not loudly, just like a seed resting in dark soil, waiting. Morning comes softly to the basin of seeds. The stream moves under a thin veil of mist, and the grasses beyond it shine with dew. The fire is burned low, but its warmth remains in the stones around the hearth, near the covered storage pit. Baskets rest under hides. A few seeds have escaped onto the ground, tiny pale points against dark soil, waiting for birds, insects, weather, or some future that no one here can yet imagine. You wake to the smell of damp earth, smoke, and roasted roots lingering from the night before around you. The group rises slowly. No one hurries. The camp has a settled feeling, as if the land itself has asked everyone to stay a little longer. Yet, this is still not a village. People are not farmers. They've not fenced fields or built houses to last for generations. Their lives remain tied to movement, memory, and the changing gifts of wild places. Still, something in this basin feels like a threshold. You watch as an older person checks the food cache, lifting the covering carefully to make sure the stored roots and seeds remain dry. Another person walks to the grass patch with a child and bends the stalks gently to show which seed heads are ready. Nearby, someone shakes a woven mat and spreads it in the sun. The day opens with tasks that look ordinary, but ordinary tasks are often where history hides. By the end of the last ice age, roughly after 12,000 years ago, many human groups in different parts of the world began shifting toward more settled ways of life in some regions. This eventually led to agriculture, villages, domesticated plants and animals, pottery, larger communities, and all the complicated pleasures of neighbors. But before that transformation, there were long periods of experiment. People gathered, stored, returned, watched, burned, selected, and learned. The line between wild gathering and cultivation was not always sharp. You walk toward the stream. Mud cools your feet. Small insects skim the surface of the water. A bird lifts from the reeds, scattering droplets from its wings. The basin holds many times at once. The old mobile world is here, in the bundles, tools, embers, and watchful habits. The future is here, in the stored food, the repeated hearth, the careful attention to plants, and somewhere, far beyond your sight, the deep, hidden path stretches backward into those enormous 80,000 years of walking, making, burying, singing, painting, sewing, watching, and remembering. The group does not know it is nearing the edge of a new era. People rarely do. They do not wake up and say, "Ah, yes, today we shall stand meaningfully at the threshold of the Neolithic." They wake up because the fire needs tending, because children are hungry, because clouds suggest rain, because seeds are ready, because someone has misplaced a tool and is pretending not to be annoyed. A detail easy to overlook is that the first steps toward farming were not always obviously beneficial. Early agricultural life could bring heavier labor, narrower diets, disease from living close together, and social tensions over stored food and land. For many people, foraging remained flexible and successful for a very long time. So the move toward farming was not a simple story of progress from bad to good. It was a bargain. And like many bargains in human history, the fine print was extensive. You crouch beside the old hearthstone. Beneath the fresh ash are earlier layers, dark soil, cracked stone, charcoal, tiny bones, seed fragments, flakes from tool repair. If future archaeologists were to excavate this place, they might find repeated use and wonder how often people came here, what seasons brought them back, how long they stayed, and whether they were beginning to shape the plants around them. The camp would speak in fragments, enough to ask questions, not enough to answer everyone. That is how the hidden ears remain. They remain in footprints hardened by ash, in smoke stains on cave roofs, in broken stone flakes, in beads made from shells, in ochre ground to powder, in needles of bone, in graves, in plant starch caught in cracks of grinding stones, in DNA carried by living people, in seafloors where ancient coastlines disappeared beneath rising water. They remain not as one clear voice, but as a chorus of traces. You follow the child and older person into the grass. The child gathers seeds too eagerly, pulling some stalks too hard. The older person corrects the motion. Gentle, leave some. Take these. Watch the wind. Watch the birds. The child tries again. Seeds fall into the basket with a dry, whispering sound. The lesson is small, but it belongs to the long chain of attention that will one day change landscapes. Researchers approach this transition with care because no single explanation fits every region. Climate warming after the Ice Age created new environments. Some wild grains became more abundant. Populations may have grown in certain places. Storage may have encouraged longer stays. Social gatherings may have increased the need for dependable food. Local choices mattered. Accidents mattered. Generations of noticing mattered. The rise of farming was not a switch flipped in the dark. It was dawn spreading unevenly across many valleys. By afternoon, the basin is full of soft work. Seeds dry in the sun. Roots roast under ash. Cord is twisted from plant fibers. A stone blade is resharpened. A child naps with one hand open, still dusty from the grass. Smoke rises straight up, undisturbed by wind. The air has warmed enough to release the smell of wet soil and green stems. You hear insects, water, low voices, low and the occasional crack of a rootkin splitting in heat. Modern life often treats ancient time as a ladder. First this, then that, then finally us, with our glowing screens and impressive ability to lose charges. But here, sitting beside the stream, the story feels wider and calmer. These people are not waiting to become modern, they are complete in their own world. Their knowledge is deep, their relationships are real, their evenings are warm when the fire holds. Their mornings are busy when food must be gathered. Their griefs, jokes, skills and hopes do not need writing to have mattered. Evening arrives in gold. The group gathers once more around the hearth. Stored food is covered. Baskets are drawn in. The child's seed lesson becomes a small bit of laughter, retold by someone with exaggerated gestures. The older person pretends not to enjoy the teasing. The stream darkens. The first star appears above the basin. Faint at first, then clearer. You sit close to the fire and look back across the journey. The first valley, the footprints in ash, the cold camp under stars, the gestures before words, the flint edge, the long road, the rivers and shores, the Neanderthal neighbor, the smoky cave, the burial, the ochre, the music, the children, the mammoth plain, the painted underground, the bone needle, the elder story, the vanished cousins, the seeds before the farm. All of it belongs to the hidden majority of human time. And even now, after every tool and trace has been studied, after laboratories have tested pigments, dated bones, mapped genomes, and measured ancient footprints, much remains quiet, not empty, quiet. The fire settles lower, the basin darkens, the hidden years remain around you, deep and patient, like night beyond the circle of flame. Now the journey slows even further. The stream keeps moving in the darkness, but softly now, as if it knows the story is ending. The fire glows in a bed of ash, no longer bright enough to throw large shadows, only warm enough to light the nearest hands, the nearest faces, the nearest stones around the hearth. The group rests beneath stitched hides and quiet breathing. The baskets are covered, the seeds are safe, the tools lie where morning can find them. You do not need to follow another path tonight. The long road can wait beyond the valley. The painted animals can sleep in their cave. The mammoths can move across the plain under stars. The river can carry moonlight to places you will never have to name. All of history, even its deepest and oldest rooms, can become gentle when seen from beside a fading fire. You breathe in slowly. There is smoke in the air, but it is soft now. There is cold beyond the shelter, but it does not reach all the way in. The ancient world gathers around you without asking anything. No lesson to hold tightly, no mystery to solve before sleep. Only the quiet knowledge that people lived, loved, learned, remembered, and endured through ages, so long they almost become ski. And somewhere in that vastness, a child's footprint remains in mud. A hand rests in red pigment. A needle passes through hide. A voice hums in a cave, and an ember waits beneath ash for morning. The night settles gently. The fire fades. The hidden years rest,